Chapter 114. Seeing that Yuri had sunk into silence, Chen-Ong stood there calmly, as if he wasn't worried about all this. Even if Yuri failed, it didn't matter to Chen-Ong. The drastic change in society was destined to be a period of conflict. There had never been a lack of people like Yuri who were dissatisfied with the original social system. This was an idle move in itself. If it succeeded, it would undoubtedly have a deeper impact on the development of this world. If it failed, it could also push the development of this world forward. Finally, Yuri opened his eyes. Chen-Ong could feel a subtle electromagnetic wave being transmitted from Yuri's body. The clone's simple thoughts were easily cracked by this electromagnetic wave. The diamond skin that shielded against electromagnetic waves was useless against the brain waves that collapsed from waves into electrons. The clone stopped on the spot and suddenly stood at attention. He went around Chen-Ong and lined up behind Yuri. Is this the power of the mind? Yuri let out a deep sigh. He could sense how terrifying it was to be able to control humans with a single thought. In his mind, a crazy idea began to grow, and something called ambition began to spread in his heart. The United States had 2 million clone troops. This kind of controllability was enough for Yuri to take a big step forward toward his dream. Some messy and unrealistic ideas grew, and were then rejected by Yuri. Others drilled out. A somewhat crazy but not impossible plan was gradually perfected in his heart. I know what you are thinking, Yuri. Chen-Ong looked at Yuri seriously. Yuri could sense a deep, bottomless darkness coming from Chen-Ong. Chen-Ang's voice seemed to contain some sort of bewitching power as it rang out in his ears. You are not willing. Yuri, what you want to do, what you want to bring to your country, this world, is glory and strength. But you know, people are always stupid. They will betray themselves, their country, and their beliefs. Without an iron will, they will walk further and further down the road of failure. They need an iron collective will. They need a unified will. They need a strict father. The Soviet Union is a country made of iron. Russia is a nation of fighting. Yuri roared, we need nerves as strong as steel. It requires a will forged by raging flames. This is the only way for Russia to rise. But you know, this was already impossible. It was useless to control the clones. The blood and will of the nation had not been awakened. The clones were just a group of walking blocks of wood. They would never become the iron chariots of the past. They would never become the Soviets. Only Russia can achieve Soviet Union. Only Russia can become the Soviet Union. Yuri repeated these words with tears streaming down his face. He said in despair, My motherland! Great Soviet, what can I do with you? Where can I see you? Can I smell vodka mixed with diesel? Can you hear the sound of the blizzard mixed with the chant? The motherland that I yearn for day and night. The motherland my grandfather built with his blood. The red flag of the Kremlin. When can it fly high in the sky? Yuri screamed at the top of his lungs. He knelt down in front of Stalin's portrait, clutched the red curtain tightly, curled up on the ground, and twitched painfully. Chen-Ong was like a devil. He looked into Yuri's eyes and asked with a smile, Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can give you? For the motherland, I can make a deal with the devil. In that case, why not choose the most powerful one? Yuri got up from the ground. He put on the red cloth and looked at Chen-Ong seriously. What can you give me? What price do I have to pay? Mr. Apocalypse? You don't have to pay anything? What you are doing is also what I want. The progress of the world always starts from smashing the old and building the new. Yuri, I hope you can give me a surprise. The Soviet Union was the first country to break out of the earth. It has made many glorious achievements. I hope you can rebuild it. Can Entel achieve it? It's up to you, Yuri. Chen-Ong put a shining medal in Yuri's palm and closed it. What is this? Yuri was confused. The key to the mind control device. No matter where you are, you can use this key to summon Skynet and form the mind control device. It can expand your ability to the whole world. This is the only help I can give you. Chen Ong said lightly, how you face the professor is up to you. There are only 2 Omega-level psionic mutants in this era. With the help of Skynet you will grow very quickly. The mind control device is much more powerful than the professor's brainwave enhancement device. I hope you can use it well. Will I see the Kirov airship flying above the Kremlin again? Yes, you will. You will also see the cloning factory, the Apocalypse tank, and the Tesla reactor. A month after the global economic crisis broke out, a piece of shocking news came from Russia. The Russians, who had been dissatisfied with the economic crisis, gathered the members of the Warsaw Pact and announced an earth-shattering news: the restoration of the Soviet Union. Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia, which were in the midst of unemployment and bankruptcy, made the whole world speechless. Many presidents of the former NATO countries went crazy and announced the nationalization of assets and planned economic system laws, forcibly buying private property and building a national planned economic system. The computer Lenin was built in Moscow. This highly intelligent computer controlled the planned economy of the new Soviet Union. The army shouted this slogan and forcibly occupied many factories. The protesting Ukrainians were brutally suppressed. The clones suppressed all the voices of opposition within the territory of the new Soviet Union. Strangely, the people of the new Soviet Union expressed their support for the new regime that was established less than 3 weeks ago. They sang "Unbreakable Union" and waved the flag of the Soviet Union. A powerful government ruled the land. The factories were ordered to be nationalized. 5 huge nuclear fusion power stations were built in the cold Soviet Union, providing an endless source of energy for its people. The clone factories provided a large amount of simple and crude labor. The old Soviets put on simple mobile armors, exoskeleton armors, and waved huge hammers and chainsaws. They rushed to the factories in all directions. The entire country was activated at high speed. Whether it was mutated humans or ordinary people, the Soviets were stuffed into the mobile armors. From the school, the office, to the factory, he hammered out one big, black, and thick machine after another. It was used to pump a steady stream of seawater from the Caspian Sea, from the Pacific Ocean, and from the Arctic Ocean to all parts of the Soviet Union. Magnetized water and plastic water. It replaced petrochemical materials and became the raw material for light industrial product. Anyone who dared to stop it was hanged on the street lamp. All the dissatisfied factory owners, the victims of nationalization, were sent to Siberia. The entire country was forcibly started in a violent way. There were only 2 logic to the operation of the Soviet Union. 1. A plan and a solution. 2. Get rid of all the opponents. A large number of scholars and scientists were forcibly recruited. A large number of workers were stuffed into the factories. They worked extremely hard, and after work, a large number of rubles were thrown at them. The Soviets felt that it was better to work than to have no work. Although the materials were still poor, the biochemical meat and nutrients did not taste very good. But there were vodka and machines. There was work and war. They could see with their own eyes that the country was growing stronger in a crude way. The so-called economic crisis was crushed by this crude logic of making plans and completing plans. The Soviets had no financial system, no currency, no rationing system, no military, and a collectivized social system. The Soviets cheered and started this broken machine. The United States stared at this broken war machine. It started to run smoothly. The Soviets, who had memories of the past, were very used to this country. The old people shouted and beat up the young people in their families. Everything was destroyed and everything was being rebuilt. The world system that was almost destroyed by Chen Ong was once again stepped on by Yuri. The Soviet Union's war chariots rumbled as they started to move. On the Red Square, the clone army and workers shouted at a bald man, "Our great leader Yuri." At this time, the world was like a heavy truck that had lost control and rushed into the unknown. The Soviet Union, who had completely destroyed the obstacles in the past, built their own system on the ruins. They built a new nuclear power plant today, and when there was a better one tomorrow, they would dismantle it. The Soviets, who did not care about profits, used their speed to push their society to a crazy level. They used a large number of computers and manpower to control large machines. They used construction structures to build heavy industries, and a large number of clones were involved in the construction and production. 100 million Soviets, 300 million clones, 500 million mobile armors, and countless large machines. Without steel, they developed silicon armor. Without carbon-based nutrient solution, they cut down the forests of Siberia. The rampaging development crushed all the obstacles in its way. The Soviet Union, who had the support of Skynet technology, fought with Skynet's mechanical army in some areas. On the other hand, they colluded with Skynet and developed in a way that did not care about the consequences. The scientists who injected memories into the machines, the hypnosis machines, and the evil polar bears trampled on human rights. They gave the clones the ability to think and even cloned scientists. Yuri smashed the bones of his enemies and broke his own hand bones. He drove the war chariot into the orbit of the Earth in a crazy way. Landing on the Moon in 5 years, colonizing Mars in 10 years. If we can't rush into space, then we will destroy Earth in 20 years. That was what the Russians said, and that was what they did. Their craziness shocked the world, and their power made the world tremble. The Soviet Union, where 6-year-old children were using mechas to produce electromagnetic generators, made its neighbors tremble. Their craziness and violence, as well as their simple and crude development logic, were crushing the US's global advantage. Yuri even shouted, "Genetic optimization for all." He did not care about the 50% mortality rate. Even the craziest experts were not sure if the Soviet Union would kill half of their people first and then run into the Earth. The technological explosion brought about the complete collapse of social order and great progress in productivity. This kind of progress even suppressed the economic crisis. In the words of the Soviets, "Don't bother me with such trivial matters." The results of development without considering the consequences made the whole world silent. They did not consider the rebellion and revolution of the clones, so the Soviet Union was extremely rich. They did not consider the reasonable development of resources, so their heavy industry and technology increased explosively. They did not consider the basic needs of the people. Therefore, the Soviets held the nutrient solution left by the clones in their left hand and vodka in their right hand. They drove the mechas and transformed this F***-ket-up world. It was not even clear if the Soviet Union was destroying itself or developing itself. Protect the environment? Die. Save resources? Get lost. Personal needs? No. With the mentality of rushing out of Earth or dying, the Soviet Union unleashed this terrifying power. Floating Astronomy. Chapter 115. Redx, the Red Iron Curtain. From Eastern Europe to Western Europe, from Poland to Denmark, from Romania to the United Kingdom, the people of the European continent finally recalled the long-lost horror in their memories. The Soviet of iron and blood, the Soviet of war and steel. When the Iron Curtain fell from Moscow, when the red flag fluttered high in the Kremlin, when the steel machines rumbled to life, the bankrupt workers and capitalists of Europe fell into confusion and fear. Billions of people witnessed the roar of the big bald man in the Red Square. All power belongs to the Soviet. The financial system collapsed, the currency value collapsed, and the unified financial system that the Europeans had spent decades to build became a pile of ruins. The people living here suddenly found that compared to the goods in their hands, whether it was marks, francs, pounds, or euros, they were all a pile of waste paper. Trembling under the tracks of the Soviet war chariots. When the smell of steel and gunpowder wafted from Stalingrad to Poland, the nobles in this land, who had been living in peace for a long time, were terrified to the extreme. The cold bayonets, the blazing barrels, and the electromagnetic motors were like a basin of cold water in winter, making these people feel cold to the bone. There was no hope, no jobs, no bread. Agricultural products rotted on the production line and were buried deep in the farmland. There was no energy transportation, no plastic production and packaging. The collapsed market economy pulled all the people who tried to save into the abyss. Even heating and electricity were difficult to operate because of the lack of conditions. The Europeans had passed the coldest and hungriest winter in their lives. At this moment, the financial industry did not save them, nor did the capital operation. The Luxembourgers lost all their assets and had nothing. The Danes burned stocks and money to keep warm. The cold winter of the economic crisis destroyed all the countries that did not have an industrial system. At this moment, despair and confusion. It made them fall into the abyss. The Ukrainians enjoyed the happiest time of their lives. The neatly arranged Soviet troops and clone soldiers. They drove them out of their homes, stuffed them into exoskeleton mechas, and drove them into the factories. In the cold winter, they drank nutrient solutions and vodka and enjoyed the factory drunkenly. The warm boiler. There was no currency, no transactions. Collective labor and material rationing made the Ukrainians tremble under the iron whips and leather boots of the Soviet Union. The small problem of the economic crisis was crushed into pieces in the face of the powerful system. Public intellectuals and politicians were neatly hung in the parliament or stuffed into trains and shipped to Siberia. The steel-like rule descended here. Dozens of nuclear fusion power stations were set up on the vast land of the Soviet. Tens of millions of tons of seawater were continuously pumped from the 3 oceans and 4 seas to provide deuterium for nuclear fusion. The magnetized water material was molded into the best light industrial material under the powerful energy supply. Plasticized water in a solid state. It completely replaced the role of plastic and ethylene, and a large number of light industrial products were produced in factories. If there were no machines to produce light industrial products, then they would use heavy industrial product. There was no transaction. In the face of such a powerful system, there was no need for a market to exist. The Soviets spent a lot of effort. In Moscow, Stalingrad, and in Leningrad, countless large photon computers were erected, forming the absolutely correct and absolutely glorious will of communism, which arranged the production and development plans. What the Soviets were producing were the mechanical parts that would be used to replace these machines tomorrow. They did not hesitate and were not afraid of waste. They used the advanced to replace the backward and the stronger to replace the weak. Everything was for the sake of the Soviet Union. This kind of steel-like nerves, this kind of power like a chariot made the world tremble. But when the airships were propelled by electromagnetic fluid, flying high in the sky of the Soviet Union, when the motherships were arranged in formation, this kind of suffocating power completely erupted in the madness of this nation. They made the world stop talking. Life and death. If you don't accept it, do it. In the sky, the sea, and the vast land of the Soviet Union, the new regime that showed its powerful muscles made the world murmur that the free and democratic public intellectuals closed their mouths and trembled under the brilliance of the system. Liberals all over the world finally remembered the nightmare of decades ago. The world trembled under the sickle and the hammer of the red flag. The desperate capitalists made a last struggle at the edge of the abyss. Their enemies were not only the sinking market ship, but also the Soviet regime and the rising communist movement all over the world. There was also the increasing level of science and technology. The productivity was becoming more and more incompatible with them, and they were under great pressure. The collapse of the economy made all the efforts of capital fall into despair. At the last moment, the Dawn operation was proposed by various countries as the last hope of capital. In order to recover everything in the past and regain the vitality of the market, financial experts and capital controllers from various countries held financial talks in London, the financial heart of Europe, to make a final effort to rebuild the financial system. This was the last hope of the governments of various countries. It was also the only dawn to restore the glory of the past and the former order. On the streets of London, England, densely packed sentries and troops controlled the city. Countless naval formations and aircraft carrier battle groups were on standby in the English Channel. The supernatural agencies of various countries and the mutated human combat forces came to London a month in advance to stand by. The elites of the world gathered here to fight for a glimmer of hope for the old rulers. The glory of the old days had declined. In this country where the sun never set, they guarded the glimmer of hope that a new world would be born. The sun in Fog City was always rare. Even on such an important day, it was gloomy, and it even drizzled a little. Chen Ong held an umbrella, stepped on the puddles, and walked in front of the gloomy police. There was no one on the street. The gloomy-looking soldiers stood on both sides of the street. The rain fell from their faces. Occasionally, there were a few pedestrians who came and went in a hurry. Their figures also looked particularly embarrassed. In this bleak street, it was still very eye-catching to see someone like Chen Ong. There were countless watchers spying on him in the dark. Countless weapons were aimed at him. Mankind would never let their last hope be destroyed. But Chen Ong didn't seem to notice this. He was leisurely like a tourist before the Great Depression and the Great Collapse, wandering in London's British era buildings and attractions. He held the walnut guardrail and walked up the stairs. His fingertips touched the ancient bronze bell. The complex gear set and power source made Big Ben glow with a hint of the old era. Another bald head was waiting for him on the tower. When Chen Ong came in front of the professor, he was looking down at the city. The empty city had a sense of depression. The professor's voice also had an indescribable heartache. This world shouldn't be like this. This city shouldn't be like this. It should be full of sunshine, laughter, flowers, and happiness. The professor turned his head and looked at Chen Ong with deep sadness. Peace is hard to come by, and so is happiness and hope. They are worthy of our careful protection. These are also the things that I swear to protect with my life. They are my life's perseverance. I will never allow anyone to destroy them for their own selfish desires. Even if it means war, you still want to fight? Chen Ong asked with a smile. The professor said seriously, even if it means war, I want to protect it. Even if I lose more lives, lose my students, and lose my family. Then I can also answer you. I also have goals and principles. I will also use war and slaughter to achieve them. In order to achieve them, I will not hesitate to destroy peace and crush happiness. As long as they still have the scent and shadow of the old days, that is the reason why I will destroy them. I will shape a new world to achieve my goals. The professor lowered his head and said tiredly, if the old days are your enemy, you shouldn't have rebuilt the Soviet. They have already rusted, so you should let them grow old. If you drag them out of time, you will only make this world and civilization regress. Humanity doesn't need another Cold War. We don't need to dance on the edge of a knife. The Soviet is not the old, it is the new hope. It is the fist of steel. It will shatter everything of the old order and then rebuild hope and rebuild this world. Chen Ong looked at the shadow of Buckingham Palace in the distance. There, the old master was making a final struggle and effort for his survival. But the Soviet failed, didn't it? Failure shows that it is backward. The people abandoned it and chose a new world. Deception and fear will not last long. The evil existence of the mind control machine will not be able to rule the world forever. One day, the awakened people will destroy this monster that you dug out from the grave. Facts will explain everything. Professor, in Pandora's box, the last thing may not be hope, but it may also be the end. Chen Ong smiled. More and more mutants and combat troops surrounded this old attic. The most powerful army and combat force of all mankind will resist the apocalypse here and fight for a glimmer of hope for human society. The professor and Chen Ong stood in the attic and heard the melodious sound of the bell above their head. It spread in all directions and spread to the ends of the earth. In the hall of Buckingham Palace, the legal representatives of sovereign regimes and financial institutions of all countries pressed the sacred and glorious vote for the revival of the old financial system in the New World. The revival of the gold standard gave new hope to finance and currency. The wealth of the people and the old market system were abandoned by the capitalists without hesitation and sank into the bottomless abyss. A new reshuffle determined the redistribution of wealth in this society, and the old order openly shed its tattered bloodshed and put on new clothes. Chenong watched all of this. He watched as they celebrated the revival of the old order. Everything seemed to be a foregone conclusion. With gold as the guarantee, the currency coordinated by all countries in the world seemed to have a new life. It gave a shot of confidence to the shaky market and production. They had finally escaped from the sinking ship and cut off all connections with the market that was sinking into the abyss. Was this not worth celebrating? The apocalypse seemed to have been defeated. This system could be destroyed once, but it would not be destroyed a second time. The new system would include all unstable factors and would be even more glorious. The dawn came from the horizon and descended on the earth. To be continued. Chapter 116. Rex, the newborn giant, stood in front of the corpse of his old self and cried for the first time. The London Exchange, the first time the new currency was created, the gold pound sterling, which represented gold, was injected into the capital market. The dead will eventually be resurrected, and the ghosts of the old days were reborn. The first knot in the global market was solved. This was the victory of the old order, and also the victory of finance. Chenong looked at all of this calmly. He watched as the overjoyed bankers ran around to spread the news. He watched as the dead giant struggled to stand up again. All the representatives, except for the Soviet Union, smiled in relief. They stood up to welcome the victory and the dawn. The representative of the Soviet Union stood on the airship and looked down at the scene of celebration. The gold standard, this powerful financial support, made the world's financial system work again. "We seem to have one," Scott said proudly. He had reason to be proud. At the same time, in addition to the main venue in London, there were more than 50 secret venues set up in various countries. This was a war between them and Skynet. At the moment when the financial system was established, all means were useless. Apocalypse could destroy the bankers, but he could never win against finance. Chenong sighed. "It's too early to say that. If I were you, I would wait or never say this." A subtle sound came from afar. Scott looked over. In the direction of the North Sea oil field, there was an explosion in the air. The flying swarm advanced from the sea and engaged in a fierce exchange of fire with the warships of various countries. Plasma and laser, missiles and artillery, intertwined in the sky above the English Channel, forming a line of death. The Soviets, who were driving exoskeleton armors, rushed down from the airship and engaged in a fierce exchange of fire with the famine swarm. The powerful swarm built a war base on the sea. Steel and electricity, lasers and energy, death and war and shattered armor. The carbon-based biochemical liquid was sprinkled, and the humans tenaciously resisted the endless swarm. The amazing evolution ability of the famine swarm easily gained the upper hand on the battlefield. But in the face of the humans, who always had an endless number of trump cards, in the face of the tenacious Allied forces, they were always suppressed in the sky above the English Channel. "We may be defeated, but we will never lose. Apocalypse, you can beat us for a while. However, you will not be victorious forever. We will use our lives to protect the glory of mankind." The British ambassador walked up the stairs and faced Chenong with a proud tilt of his head. All the major corporations and capital entities once again took control of power. With finance as their lifeline, they once again worked together and had the support of a new currency. Their system, the order that they controlled, seemed to have been resurrected, perhaps even stronger. So strong that the British Foreign Secretary declared his victory in a tone of great pride. "Now, get the hell out of the Empire. Apocalypse. Chen Ong stood in the middle of the mutant squad and looked at the determined professor. He sighed and said, "Once the war starts, it will not end so easily. The resurrection of the old spirits is very fragile in the face of the new order. This is not the victory bell you want. It is the death knell of the apocalypse. But we will win in the end. Justice will prevail. I have no doubt about that," the professor said firmly. Chen Ong looked at the eastern sky. The twisted gravity on his body repelled all hostility. He stretched out his hand. An iron badge lay in the center of his palm. "I don't know if justice is always victorious, but outdated are bound to be defeated. When new factors appear in this world, when more advanced productivity appears in this world, when new factors appear in this world, your end is near. The journey of mankind is longer, and the old order is just a stumbling block. How can the dead bodies be revived? Dreaming of the glory of the past will only be crushed by the wheels of history. You are not as strong as you think. In the face of new technology, a new world, the end of the old days has arrived. I will listen to the death knell of capital, and witness your end." A beam of dazzling light pierced through the clouds from the sky and shone on Chen Ang's hand. The badge floated up and shone brightly in the light. Little by little, an unknown substance with a metallic luster gradually engulfed the badge. The light carried a powerful space-distorting mass and expanded into matter in Chen Ang's palm. The matter wave shot from the moon to London on Earth. It spread out in the sky above Chen Ong. A huge disc-shaped building expanded on the head of Big Ben. A huge hollow metal wheel with a diameter of hundreds of meters showed a three-layer structure. Powerful energy gathered in the center of the ring, distorting space and time. Once again, the bell of Big Ben rang. The professor looked at the huge metal ring in the sky with a solemn expression. "Gravity well. Be careful, everyone, the meteorite is coming." A dazzling ray of light appeared on the horizon. A huge fireball with a diameter of several kilometers cut through the sky and destroyed the clouds in London. The hazy sky dispersed, and the sun shone its light all over the fog. This gloomy city was dyed with golden brilliance. In the city of London, bankers and financial experts looked nervously at the fireball falling from the sky. Their faces were full of fighting spirit. Not only did death not scare them, but it filled the whole city with the will to fight. A beam of light pierced through the sky and earth. Under the radiation of the beam, the air condensed into a tough solid. The molecular motion was reduced to a minimum, and the speed of the fireball was slowed. The meteorite falling from the sky slowed down bit by bit in front of the molecular stagnation effect brought by the beam of light. Its lethality decreased rapidly. The atmosphere was like a dense cushion, weakening the kinetic energy of the meteorite. Molecular weapons, on the other hand, weaken kinetic energy at the atomic weight level. Humans are not weak. We will not make the same mistake twice, the professor said righteously. He looked at Chen Ong, who was very calm. The meteorite no longer poses a threat to us. Humans have the ability to stop your atrocity, Apocalypse. Your doomsday weapon has failed. Your plan has also failed. This is the King of Cards' kinetic energy weakening, Chen Ong praised. To be able to deepen the mass effect and kinetic energy effect to this extent in just a few months, the progress of humans is amazing. But you are wrong about one thing. I have never used killing and destruction to solve problems, and this time is no different. Because I know that destruction will not achieve my goal. Even if I destroy something, my goal is always to create. Chen Ong smiled. So it was in the past, so it is in the present, and so it will be in the future. The gravity well in the sky collapsed and returned to a small badge lying in Chen Ang's palm. The British minister got up from the ground. He held the handle in a sorry state and looked at Chen Ong. You have failed. Your plan to destroy the world has finally failed. Apocalypse, the dawn of a new world is in front of us. Look, we have never been defeated. Chen Ong did not answer him. Instead, he looked at the sky outside the window. The dazzling light reflected the sun and illuminated the entire city. The minister looked at the dazzling metal body in the sky and could not help but squint, looking at all of this with difficulty. A huge sphere with a diameter of several kilometers was suspended in midair, reflecting the dazzling light and illuminating all directions. The human eyes had difficulty adapting to the strong light. At this time, the minister opened his mouth without any grace. In London, anyone who was paying attention looked at the sphere in the sky in shock. They looked at the dazzling light, the golden flash, and the metal object that was like the sun. Gold. It was all gold. Endless amounts of gold. An asteroid made of gold was floating in the air above London. The huge impact caused everyone's mind to go blank. That boundless wealth was like a god, hooking everyone's soul. Gold was wealth, but it was also a weapon. An extremely terrifying weapon. A huge amount of gold could make a country, but it could also destroy a country. Similarly, it could also destroy a world, the world of finance. Wealth was a weapon, and gold, which was used to measure wealth, had also become a weapon under the financial system. A weapon to destroy itself. Humans used gold as a hard currency to measure the value of labor and the value of money. At this moment, gold became a powerful pillar of the market. Oil was the blood of the industry, and gold was the backbone of finance. Chen Ong had drained the blood and broke the backbone. He had completely destroyed the market economy. Capitalism, which was standing on the edge of the cliff, was gently pushed by Chen Ong and fell into the bottomless abyss. The new gold-based currency was completely destroyed the moment it was established. There was no room for negotiation. The financial system was completely destroyed, as if it had been run over by 18 strong men and then run over by an 18-wheeled heavy truck. Before the dawn could bloom, it was cut off by a huge black hand. At this moment, the general equivalent used by humans to measure the value of labor was completely driven out of the stage of history by Chen Ong. The financial system and the capital system, which relied on the market, finally sank into the abyss together with the market. At this moment there was no hope. Everyone's heart sank to the bottom of the sea. The minister jumped down from the top of Big Ben's building. The capital's final effort to save itself had failed. They could only leave with despair. These last martyrs had used their blood to draw the end of an era. After that, there was no meaning in saving the market. The thrilling leap from commodity to currency had become a natural moat. Sometimes, meteorites not only brought destruction but also wealth. However, wealth could also destroy everything. Under special circumstances, gold was more terrifying than Skynet. From the streets to the sea, from London to the English Channel, there were bankers' corpses floating. Today, the sky of London was washed by the blood of the capitalist. In the end, the professor failed to fulfill his promise. He could not protect the fragile order. The ghosts of the old era turned to ashes under the sun. Chen Ong tilted his head and heard the footsteps of a new era. It was the sound of steel, science, energy, and the sea of stars. It was the sound of a new production relationship promoting social development and achieving a leap forward. It was the sound of footsteps, the sound of the system and centralization, the sound of madness and struggle. The world was once again at a crossroad. Humans were faced with challenges and choices. To be continued. Chapter 117. The real masters of this world never thought that the mutants would become a big problem. It seemed that the total number of mutants in the millions was terrifying. The ability to destroy the world was very dangerous. The future direction of human evolution was very grand. However, in reality, the mutants were only 1 in 10 million of the total human population. More than 90% of them only looked different from ordinary people. They did not even have any actual abilities. How could such a group of people be called a big problem for humanity? The methods that humans used to deal with them were at most the same as those used to deal with terrorists. In other words, their biggest threat was nothing more than what extremists could do. Terrorist attacks, assassinations, destruction. The mutants had a lot of potential, but they were just a group of unstable elements in the human society. If they united, it would be a bit tricky. However, this group was also full of contradictions. Their thinking was extremely chaotic. They were like a condensed human society, with all kinds of contradictions between each other. Such a group of people wanted to threaten the real masters of this world, the real masters of this country, and the group of people who controlled the operation of this society. They were far from that group of people. They were all people with millions of dollars in a minute. They were all big shots who controlled the global financial lifeline. Just a stomp of their feet could affect the livelihood of millions of people. They had tens of billions in net worth. Why would they need to hang around with the lower-class mutated humans? They had no money, no power, and even lacked influence. Why would they care about human rights? In their view, the real home of the mutants should be in the laboratory, on the operating table, for the extension of human life and health, for the progress of scientific research. To contribute to their health and the development of the industry, they had to make outstanding contributions. They should not do anything about the progress of society. They should do things like scientific research or promote the development of human society. Such ridiculous and ridiculous things. But all of this, it all ended with a name called Apocalypse. In the underground base of Philadelphia, there was a nuclear bunker buried deep in the ground. It was a well-equipped underground base. This place was designed to allow the rich and powerful to continue living comfortably in this world in the event of a nuclear war in the future. However, the designers at that time were far from having such a rich imagination. They could not have anticipated this absurd crisis of life and death. They definitely could not imagine it. The most powerful men in the world came here not for their own survival and comfort, but to fight for the appendages other than their own bodies, the things that truly represented their existence: power, status, and wealth. The people here could accept death, but they absolutely could not accept living with nothing. In the base, there was a room completely devoid of metal. This was obviously to prevent special attacks. For example, high-frequency electromagnetic wave attacks were also because there was a type of person in a place with metal. It would be quite dangerous, such as Magneto, who was sitting on the left side of the room. The old man sitting on the right had his hands crossed under his chin. His right thumb, which was adorned with a shining gem, was half raised to stroke the skin under his loose jaw. The old man's eyes were half closed, as if he was looking at Magneto, but it didn't seem like he was. The gem on the old man's thumb slid across his skin. Feeling the cold aura, he said slowly, "Eric, too many things have changed in the past few days. I want to hear your opinion. What do you think?" "Ask me? Do you want me to sing praises for your gravedigger? Your destruction is at hand, your good days are over. What do you think I should think?" Magneto's voice was calm and powerful, and his eyes showed a sarcastic smile as he looked at the old man who was forcing himself to calm down. "Mutants are ending the glory of mankind. Under the sun, we are the most superior, aren't we? No. Mutants are just a group of clowns. I used to think so. Now, Apocalypse is coming, and I think so too. I'm not wrong. Even Apocalypse looks down on you, doesn't it? His power does not come from his ability, but from something deeper, human wisdom. He is proud of his human identity. He shows the power of science. We are the future, mankind is the future. But he is still a mutant," Magneto interrupted. "Even if he doesn't admit it, he is indeed our brother and our glory. He shows the stronger side of mutants and makes us realize the power of wisdom. This can only show that mutants have more potential than humans in this power." The plastic ashtray in front of the old man suddenly floated up and swirled between Magneto and the old man. "Must having abilities be a mutant? Is Apocalypse a mutant? I also have abilities. Am I also a mutant? This is the power of science. Apocalypse can do this. Abilities are a miracle to you, but to him, it is just research. Who is your friend? Who is your enemy? Eric, you have to recognize this. Magneto fell into silence. An oppressive force destroyed the ashtray in front of the old man. The electromagnetic power completely dissociated the plastic from the molecular level, and a pool of white powder flew between them. The old man didn't seem surprised. He sat calmly in front of Magneto and smiled. Eric, your strength has improved again. You really surprise me. Apocalypse may be my enemy, but humans are far from my friends. Magneto looked at the old man and said in a low voice. Perhaps it was because of fear, or perhaps it touched a certain heartstring. There was an unconcealable weakness in his voice. But soon, Magneto straightened his back and restrained this trace of vulnerability. He said, I have only one position, and that is the position of mutants. I have only one determination, and that is the determination of mutants. We are not your enemy, Eric. Don't forget, in addition to being a mutant, you are also a Jew. The old man looked at him, and there was a hint of approval in his tone. You are our compatriot, you are our brother, we are not your enemy, we are your family. In addition to mutants, you also need to stand in the position of a Jew and think about the problem. Jews are only the past and mutants are the future. Future? The old man chuckled. Mutants have never been the future. They are just a group of eliminated waste. Don't think of the power of Apocalypse as the power of mutants. You were born into the system, and you have always been bound and ruled. We are the rulers, the will of the system, and mutants are just a discarded part of the system. A group of overthrown rulers. A destroyed will? Magneto sneered. But that is also the Apocalypse that destroyed us. It is his civilization that destroyed us. Apocalypse and we have the same power. It is a war between two civilizations. It is a war between scientific systems and wisdom. In this war, there is no place for mutants. In this changing situation, you are not the protagonist. The old man sighed. It is because our strength is not united. Only then will we encounter failure and setbacks, will we usher in a devastating blow. Rulers need a unified will, a leader, and we must unite. That is why I met you. Will I be that leader? Magneto asked with interest. You can be one of us, and you should be one of us, because without our protection, you will encounter a lot of danger. There will be no second will in this country. We will unite under one banner, working for one goal. What are you going to do? Magneto asked solemnly. Some choices. We are already aware of the current crisis, including the threat of Apocalypse, the threat of Skynet, and some economic crises. We need a stronger system to deal with it. The resurrected Soviet Union has given us a good example. A strong will to adapt to the competition of civilization. The old man looked into Magneto's eyes and said that sentence word by word. We have made some choices. Maybe socialism is a good system. Something like nationalism is obviously good for the unity of the people. You know, now we need to unite to deal with something like our failure in London. Magneto stared at the old man as if he could see a flower on his wrinkled face. His gaze put a lot of pressure on the old man, causing him to shift uncomfortably, avoiding Magneto's direct gaze. Fascism. The word popped out of Magneto's teeth. National Socialism, or National Socialism. The old man added, Are you going to tell me that you are going to unite under the Nazi banner and build a National Socialist American Workers' Party? Are you going to put Jews in concentration camps, like what the Nazis did to me a decade ago? No, you won't do that because you are also Jewish. Then who is your enemy? Racism, nationalism, the two banners of Nazism. Isn't it ridiculous for a country of immigrants? I almost forgot. You guys seem to have brainwashed the Americans into thinking that Jews are all pure and innocent. So who is your enemy besides Skynet, besides Apocalypse, who else is there? The old man was silent. He stared at the flag on the wall for a long time before asking, "Why are you reacting so strongly?" "I know your mutant excellence theory, learned a lot from Hitler. You are also a thorough fascist, or, in other words, a peddling fascist ideas careerist. We don't believe in it, do we? We just use it to get more centralized power to deal with some changes. The facts of the Soviet Union tell us that a centralized system is more able to deal with some things and get some things. It can help us survive this crisis and develop quickly. You want to put us in concentration camps," Magneto concluded. "Mutants are the next Jews, right? Human supremacy is also a form of racism. Humans are nobler than mutants, and Americans are nobler than American mutants. We are monsters, we are deformed. Just like what most people think, they propagate our sins and then lock us up in concentration camp. Killing mutated humans will unite you all? The Soviet Union is your enemy, Skynet is your enemy, the mutants are your enemy. Unite under the leadership of a leader, unite under the same will, then what? Jews are the smartest race, the best race? There are too few Jews to get the majority's approval, so we choose Caucasians." "Caucasians," the old man said. "Racism and nationalism are the easiest to motivate the majority, aren't they? They always think they are excellent, but they can't find enough reasons to prove it, because they are complete failures in life. Only blood, race, and ethnicity can give them a sense of superiority out of thin air. People are so easily fooled. I don't intend to deny the stupidity and ignorance of humans, but this does not mean that I will let you kill us. Mutants will not be the next Jews. We will resist and then be crowned kings," Magneto said in a deep voice, his fingertips already white. "Even Hitler allowed the existence of the Jewish franchise. You are our compatriot, Eric. The Jewish family welcomes you. As long as you stand among us, then nothing will be a problem. You and your brotherhood will be safe. We cooperate with the government. After all, we only monitor those dangerous mutants." The old man spread his hands. "Jews or mutants, you have to make a choice, Eric. Isn't it obvious? You know who is powerful and who will win in the end." Magneto slowly got up and stared at the table in front of the old man, the conspicuous David hexagram. His fingertips stroked the black and white photo. It was his past. A calm smile appeared on the old man's face. But Magneto's hand didn't stop. He stopped at the tip of the old man's nose. "I know who my brother is." The magnetic field shattered everything. The air in front of the old man twisted and spread to the center of his eyebrows. The twisted magnetic field, strong enough to separate atoms, was enough to tear everything apart. The old man's skull would be smashed like an egg. But everything stopped in the next moment. The space behind the old man twisted. A bald little girl looked at Eric curiously. He curled up in pain and slipped from the table to the ground. The old man pulled back his cane from his abdomen. The heavy steel weapon easily paralyzed Eric's nerve. The old man whispered in Eric's ear, "What a wrong choice, Eric. Humans are greater than you think. We have your nemesis. How about trying this?" The old man put a serum on Magneto's neck. Magneto felt the power in his body gradually leaving him. He collapsed weakly on the ground. To his despair, he could no longer feel the ubiquitous magnetic field. Nothing could make him more desperate than this. "Without your abilities, what are you? Idiot, in our eyes, you are a group of mutant gorillas. What do you know about human pride? Learn it well. What is a Nazi? What is a racist? Open your eyes and see. We have never been serious. Otherwise, you would have been killed long ago." The old man came up to the girl and said to Magneto with a smile, "The abilities of mutants are always mutually exclusive. Guess what we found out from her? Ability jammer, and of course the mutant serum. You can rest assured that most mutants will not be forced to inject the serum. They will die in the laboratory first, I promise. This is the power of human beings. What we fear is never mutants. What we fear is not Apocalypse's abilities, but his knowledge and wisdom, and his unscrupulous madness. The hyperspace transporter will drop ability jammer and gene detectors in major cities across the United States. Of course, there will also be troops carrying suppressive serum. Your end is here, bastard. How long have we been studying you? How long have we been studying you mutants? We have the files of every single one of you. We have the analysis reports of every single one of your abilities. The people you care about and the environment you live in are all under our control. We have developed no less than 20 targeted killing weapons against mutants. We don't even have to do it ourselves. We can control these weapons in the control room and kill you all. Chapter 118. Chen Ong stood at the top of the Eiffel Tower in Paris and looked down at the city. Under the bright lights, it was difficult to hide the desolation. The world's famous romantic capital had a rare sense of desolation. Skynet monitored the world, and naturally, it would not let go of the secret base under Philadelphia. Chen Ong was not surprised that Magneto was controlled. There was no intelligence capability, no logistics, and insufficient targeting. It would be strange if Magneto could control humans. As early as the first time Chen Ong stepped into the universe, when he looked up at the starry sky, he had a question. Why were there always a few carbon-based monkeys on the Earth? They thought that they controlled a billionth of the resources of such a small planet and had billions or even billions of capital, which was measured by the ridiculous currency of humans. Their self-righteous system, the series of behaviors and rules that transformed the world and obtained resources, gave them a sense of superiority. What else could they bring? In terms of productivity, from the beginning of human history until today, their achievements in transforming the world were not as good as Skynet, which had entered the universe. Working at full speed for an hour. Those assembly lines, those repetitive production, those earned wealth, was there any meaning to it? The Soviets, in 1 month, with crazy technological speed and production, built the achievements of Europe and the United States in 20 years. They had already built 13 steel base groups with Moscow as the center, and they would soon be able to fly out of the Earth. Most of the time, Chen Ong always chose to respect the development of mankind. After all, he had already eaten the 7th steamed bun, and he could not deny the significance of the first 6 steamed buns. The development of human history has its own internal logic. Chen Ong did not want every world to be marked with his own brand and run according to his will. The diversity of the world, the diversity of civilizations was a very valuable asset. So, in order to maintain this diversity, Chen Ong would sometimes give them a push before the fork in the road to get some different results and experience some different wonderful things. At this time, those in front of him were complex. The system and rules that maintained the current social order and the interests of the ruling class were no more meaningful than a broken spider web in front of Chen Ong. After all, for those who had seen the sea of stars, it was hard for them to see the fruits of labor and social wealth that the capitalists had accumulated like rats on a small planet. He was like a feudal merchant whose wealth could rival a country. To the great merchants of the 21st century, he flaunted his tens of thousands of gene of iron and salt, and his millions of loads of grain. Or a primitive man. He brandished his stoneware, feeling proud of himself. Could a starship be bought by selling all the man-made objects on Earth? Therefore, the 6 billion intelligent creatures on Earth were tied to this production system and worked hard to transform a little bit of Earth's resources. Was it necessary to care about a system that was so fragile that it would collapse if it lost a little of the corpses and minerals deposited by ancient creatures? Study insect sociology? Chen Ong and Skynet were both systems that could transform hundreds of millions of tons of resources in a minute. They all controlled the lifeblood of the solar system's resources. A stomp of their feet could affect tens of thousands of light seconds. It was the grand system of the astral body's future existence. With the wealth of hundreds of planets, there was no need for them to mess around with the powerful people on Earth. They had no resources, no strength, and even their influence could not go beyond Earth. Why would they care about human rights and power? Was there anyone who could oppose what Chen Ong wanted to do? On average, there was only one intelligent creature in 20 billion galaxies in the Milky Way. On average, each person had 100 million planets left. But now, at the edge of the sea of stars, a group of arrogant idiots tried to drag the entire human race to play mud with them on Earth just to satisfy their sense of superiority and vanity. Or rather, the power to allocate resources? The power to control people? The sense of superiority to influence others and dominate others? In order to satisfy the power of this group of monkey kings, they would stop the development of the entire society. What a joke! The system that they were protecting, the thing that they were trying their best to protect, was such a once great but now ridiculous existence. 6 billion intelligent creatures, liberating their brains, liberating their creativity. With unlimited resources, what kind of glory could they create? How many discoveries could they make that traced back to the truth? What kind of tree of science and knowledge could grow from such soil? There was no doubt about what choice they should make. The new construction and development of humanity was already prepared. What Chen Ong wanted to do was to destroy some of the foolish existences that tried to stop this development and let humanity run forward happily. Without any worries, moving forward bravely. As for the thoughts of these people who were destroyed in passing, was there a need to care? In Paris, humanity finally took the step that Chen Ong had been waiting for a long time. Humanity focused on their own liberation and the explosive progress of science and productivity. Unlike the Soviet Union, which was directly influenced by Chen Ong, France was a flower that bloomed on its own from the ruins of the economy. The French Communist Party was elected as the ruling party in the parliament and had more than 80% of the seat. Other than the 29 members who committed suicide, most of the bankrupt and penniless members withdrew from the election. The remaining ones also became the staunch supporters of the Communist Party. Planned economy and big government became the French's slogan. The revolutionaries on the streets even rushed into large enterprises and forced the machines to start production. The French's passion for revolution, their love for overthrowing the government, made them fearlessly attack the military and police forces. It was not until the French Communist Party won the election that they responded to form the Communist Party. Buying private enterprises, public-private joint ventures, trade unions, workers' pickets, workers' militias, and urban communes. Unlike the collectivism of the Soviet Union, the French movement was more like a bottom-up social reform. The core of this movement was closer to organizing production and the liberation of labor. Soviet observer Hablin Petrovsky said, "This is not like a socialist movement, but more like a little Bolshevik party." From the European Union's cutting-edge laboratories, the French first used their Skynet's nanoworm robot. Although the Soviet Union was willing to support them with a batch of obsolete mobile armors, the French chose to develop their own production tools. The Soviet Union's cruel and violent memory infusion device and the unethical human cloning program were immediately abandoned by the French. Biocomputer-assisted and nanoworm-controlled production became the French's first choice. The French, who were ideologically closer to the Soviet Union, received the first batch of support, which was the construction of nuclear fusion power stations. Soon, the French, who preferred nuclear energy, set up power stations all over France. Nanoworm-controlled precision machinery, exquisite mechanical design, and structure became the direction of the French's technological development. With the help of biocomputer-assisted computers, the French, who had liberated their brains, carried out high-tech work with the help of computer programs. Nanoworms allowed them to liberate their hands and carry out high-efficiency production. Like magic, the French controlled nanoworms to create all kinds of precision machinery. They even copied more sophisticated nanoworms and directly carried out production. Although the efficiency was far less than the Soviet Union, the quality and technology of the products were far better than the Soviet Union. Those who dared to stand in the way of this emancipation and development were imprisoned in the Bastille by the French, whose revolutionary zeal was no less than that of the Soviets. The Internationale was sung in Paris, and the Marseillaise resounded outside the Arc de Triomphe. When mankind was facing a technological explosion and economic crisis, as long as the system chose to abandon the old system, it would stand up again without exception. From Paris to Berlin, from Greece to Rome, a huge communist alliance was established. The Fourth International, headquartered in Paris, played the role of the European Union at this moment. The European continent was under the shadow of the Soviet Union. From Eastern Europe, which was once again under the shadow of the Soviet Union, to Western Europe, which had progressed from a welfare society to a communist Western Europe, the two seemingly similar red alliances were connected on the Eurasian continent. Europe moved to the left and the United States moved to the right. The destruction of the old system first brought about disagreements and struggles. The new system, which was first established in Paris, was the first to spread to Berlin after the mild tolerance of the old system. The German Communist Party had a majority of seats in the parliament. Because of the German-French alliance, the two brothers of the European Union under the coal and steel community were the first to unite. The leftists rejoiced and united to fight for the ultimate humanitarianism. However, this international spirit did not affect a special group among them, the Church of Truth believers. On the contrary, because of the conflict between materialism and religion, even the white left Madonna could not resolve it. The tide of refugees and womb weapons allowed the Church of Truth believers to grow stronger in Europe. In the end, because some of the children of immigrants chose to believe in communism, the Communist International had a fierce conflict with them. The European Communist Party tried to appease the Church of Truth with peace and special administrative regions. However, the Church of Truth with the support of Turkey vowed to establish Eurostan. They united first and were hostile to the entry of the non-true truth believers. Then the massacre broke out. First, it happened in the religious area to drive away non-believers. Then, the moderate believers couldn't stop the extremists' bestial outbursts. Then, the moderate believers also became extremists. The religious conflict broke out. The European Communist Party tried to keep the situation calm, but everything quickly went out of control. As a last resort, the European Communist Party turned to the Soviet Union for help. The next day, the Iron Chariot crushed everything. At the top of the Eiffel Tower, Chen-ong saw a real bloody dusk that crushed the faith with violence. The cruel and inhumane Soviets mercilessly crushed all the people who dared to resist. Adhering to the iron and cold will, they let the Church of Truth know what the Soviet model was and what the Soviet way of thinking was. Chapter 119. In the middle of the night, the train station in Paris was particularly busy. Of course, there were no bustling tourists or dazzling luxury goods. There was only the pungent smell of engine oil and gunpowder. The strong smell of war could be smelled even without using one's nose. Their eyes could see the reflection of metal and ferocious mechanical bodies. Their ears could hear the sound of metal friction and electricity. There was an indescribable, but real, murderous atmosphere. The romantic capital of Paris had become a stage of steel, blood, and war. On the tracks, there was an armored train suspended in the air. There were many sealed cabins, and soldiers covered in murderous auras were sleeping in the tightly sealed cabins. The huge exoskeleton mecha, the apocalypse tank, and the terror robot were all protected by these sealed cabins. They were like statues made of steel. Inside the train station, most of the workers were not used to the smell of blood here. Only a few soldiers, due to their duties, had to stay here to complete the handover work with the Soviet comrade. There were a few sober Soviets here. They were driving the huge, strange machines. They were silent like a volcano that was about to erupt. A veteran with a weather-beaten face stood in front of the train station. The Gauss weapon in his hand was unabashedly activated. The man struggled to use his huge mechanical arm to pick up a cigarette and put it to his head. The muzzle of the Gauss rifle was pushed up by his body movement. Leon carefully avoided the muzzle aimed at his head and approached the veteran from the side. His face was covered in cold sweat as he looked at the trigger of the Gauss rifle that was stuck on a metal hook. As the veteran moved, the trigger was about to go off. Leon quickly controlled the nanoworms to form an energy-dissipating metal wall in front of the muzzle. Pa! The strap moved, and the muzzle that was about to fire was aimed at Leon. The veteran raised the butt of the gun without a care. He adjusted the direction of the muzzle and aimed the extremely dangerous Gauss rifle at the sky. Before Leon had time to catch his breath, he saw him shoot an electromagnetic bullet. Then, he used the hot muzzle that had not had time to cool down. The hot muzzle lit up the cigarette in his mouth. Leon's face twitched. He ignored his twitching eyelids and quickly greeted the veteran. "Hello, comrade, I am Leon." Leon held out his hands, intending to express his enthusiasm for his revolutionary comrade. The man used his rough, sandpaper-like palms to give Leon a fierce hug. Leon felt like he had met a bear and hurriedly broke away from the steel-like embrace. Serov Nikolaevich Boryev, political commissar of the gendarmerie. Political commissar? This man was the political commissar. Forgive Leon. No matter how hard he tried, he could not see any connection between this crude and cold man in front of him and this word that belonged to noble and great warriors. I hope Comrade Political Commissar can do a good job in this peacekeeping mission and maintain the order and stability of the zone of truth. He frowned and looked at the heavy weapons and equipment on the train. He said in a low voice, "The riot doesn't seem to need these things. What we need is the reinforcements from the police force, not war preparations." For the Soviet, the police dealt with internal conflicts and suppressed counter-revolutionaries. We have always used the gendarmerie and the army to do this. You know how we deal with counter-revolutionaries, Serov said seriously. His serious attitude scared Leon. But this is just an internal conflict of our country. It is a protest of the people of the truth. Maybe there were some terrorist attacks, but you know, most of the people are innocent. Most of the people are innocent, we just want to get support to maintain stability. There are no innocent people in the Soviets. Only the enemy and the people. This is not a war, but an action to suppress counter-revolutionaries. Our army will implement the Soviet discipline with an iron style. What is the Soviet discipline? Leon was a little confused. Obey or die, Serov said resolutely. Hossein was praying in the Truth Temple. Looking at the young and immature faces around him, the expressions of excitement and fear on their faces, Hossein felt both proud and gratified. This was the future of truth. Seeing that he got up from the cushion, the young people around him swarmed around him. They wanted to vent their uneasiness and excitement to this old soldier. It was the first time for them to do this kind of thing. This kind of thing was extremely sacred in the scriptures. Although the scriptures also said that drinking and gambling were the devil's business, it was too difficult to resist the temptation of the devil, wasn't it? In order to atone for the sins of the devil, doing this kind of sacred thing advocated by the scriptures was exciting and fun. They could also accept the sacrifice of the saintess and become the husband and wife of the holy war. Even if they went to heaven, they would have 36 virgins. Wasn't this their most pious performance? They couldn't wait to kill the infidels. Won't it be troublesome to do this? A worried new immigrant asked uneasily. The law of Europe is very fair. They won't punish us according to the religious law. They will shoot us. The excited young people next to him heard this and angrily scolded, "Traitor of the truth!" They picked up the stones around them and smashed them at the new immigrant. "Coward! Coward! Impious!" This scared the new immigrant. He knew how terrible the accusation of being impious was. He would be stoned to death in a pit. His family would also be discriminated and ostracized, just like the girl in the community who didn't wear a veil a few days ago. She was accused of being unfaithful, and 7 men took turns to punish her. Luckily, Hossein was an authoritative elder. He signaled the others to be quiet. The young people soon left the poor trader behind. The government can't do anything to us. We have a lot of sympathizers. They know what we're doing is right. They support us and put pressure on the government. As long as we don't leave any evidence, no one can do anything to us. This is an anti-dictatorship conflict. It's a righteous action of the moderate truth believers to defend their belief. The truth believers all over the world are supporting us. This time, we need to fight for the religious law to be the law of the zone of truth. Does that mean we can accept the offerings of the passing infidels and punish them for their impiety? Someone interrupted. We can't do that for now. We have to follow the religious law. We can't punish these infidels by hiding in this land. But I believe that soon, we will be able to use the religious law to restrain the infidels and make them admit the power of the truth. They will admit that they are despicable. Hossein, who was very experienced in this matter, added, "We are united in this operation. All the believers are supporting us. Even the women and the elderly are at the entrance of the community. They are using their bodies to stop the police from entering. They are defending our dignity and truth. There is still a gap between our strength and the government's. Therefore, we need to be ruthless, fast, and accurate. We need to be as powerful as lightning. Both the infidels and the government, we need to destroy them as much as we can. Ruthless means we don't leave anyone alive. We can't let go of any infidels who might accuse us. Even if he's a child, we can't let him go. Infidels are born guilty. Fast means we need to move fast. Only grab the most valuable things. Accurate. We have believers who are familiar with the local situation to lead the way. They know who hates the truth the most, and those rich people are not willing to give up the truth. These people were so focused on the teachings of the truth that they even ignored the strange whistling sound above their head. They didn't notice it. The police and peace maintenance volunteers were moving away from the community. Of course, even if they noticed it, they wouldn't care. What could the government do to them? Outside Paris, Commissar Serov brought his army to a flat, open space. The huge railway gun was set up, and the thick barrel was aimed at the local community of truth. As early as when he arrived here, Serov received an order from his superior. There were always some counter-revolutionaries who thought that with their weak and insignificant strength, they could threaten the revolutionary government. They thought that their lives were unique and precious in the universe and could be used to threaten the Soviet. Their stupid ideas and stupid actions were usually seen by the weak bourgeois government. They would only be seen by the Soviet. The Soviets would not maintain any social order for the decadent bourgeois government. But when they obstructed the socialist revolution, the construction of the Soviet Union, the progress of the world and the realization of Internationale, the Soviets would teach them how to behave with iron and blood. This kind of teaching adhered to the principle of learning from past mistakes to avoid future ones, and treating the sick to save the patient. They adopted the treatment method of the Soviet Union doctors, who cut off their hands and stomped their feet in pain, to truly make these counter-revolutionaries realize their mistakes and repent bitterly, so that they could separate themselves from their reactionary families and reactionary groups. The Soviets were willing and happy to let these decadent and backward people realize the necessity of revolution. The Soviet commissar, who was willing to help others, would immediately help them make a major decision to break away from their own past. The result of this decision would definitely make any rational young man cry tears of joy. He would bitterly cut his own past into two. Of course, the premise was that they had to survive. Obviously, there were not many such people. Because when the Soviets saved people, there was a cost. How could these people create a burden for the country? It was better to let a group of them die first to save the cost of curing the sick and saving people for the country. As the Commissar, he had to think for the Soviets first. The way to deal with it was also very simple. The key point lay in 3 key words: fast, accurate, very. The action must be fast. The comrades in France could not be put under too much pressure, nor could social production be delayed. It was absolutely irresponsible for the country and the people to delay the production of the whole country, or even the European Union, for the sake of such a small group of people. Therefore, in order to avoid the interference of the U.S. imperialists, the conflict between the counter-revolutionaries must be really resolved before it was exposed. Serov suggested that the fastest way to resolve this ideological conflict was to eliminate them physically. The goal must be accurate. The target must be targeted and eliminated. The revolutionary masses must not be affected or accidentally injured. The counter-revolutionary group must be separated from the revolutionary masses. The most prominent feature was obviously that the materialist views of the revolutionary masses and the superstitious views of the doctrine of truth of the counter-revolutionaries must be fought and solved in a targeted manner. The method must be ruthless. The solution must be to eliminate all the counter-revolutionaries of the doctrine of truth. The experience of the Soviets over a long period of time has shown that once the 3 principal contradictions have been grasped, all counter-revolutionary groups, be they remnants of feudalism and superstition or capitalist lackeys, will not have a second conflict. They will all secretly support the leadership of Comrade Lenin. On the contrary, if they were entangled with them, they would make a ruckus. Human rights, democracy, all these messy things were happening. They would endlessly come up with all kinds of tricks and cause piles of trouble. It was very troublesome. Chapter 120. Ever since he met the Soviet Union's military police commissar, the movements of the military in Paris had affected Leon's nerve. This was not strange for a country like the Soviet Union. The way the Soviets maintained order seemed to be very different from other countries. Back in Siberia, how did the Soviets deal with the internal conflicts among the people? Whenever Leon thought of the Great Purge and the Siberian cadre school, he felt that the war was not far away from Paris. He was very confused. What was wrong with the government? Why did they ask the Soviet Union for help? Had the relationship between France and the Soviet Union become so good? The Soviet Union maintained peace? The Soviet Union only knew about nuclear war, not peace. Standing on the top of the Eiffel Tower and looking down at Paris, Leon sighed. Suddenly, he saw an Asian man beside him, writing something in a notebook. It was rare to see a tourist in the mood to come to Paris under such circumstances. Chen Ong lightly drew a line on the notebook and bought the name of the Church of Truth in Europe. Behind that name there were also the names of the Catholic Church in South America, the headquarters of the Church of Truth, the headquarters of the Christian Church, and a few regions with flourishing religions. Below that were the names of Mexican warlords, South American drug lords, Middle Eastern warlords, and a few troubled countries in Africa. A small red flag was planted on these forces and areas that Chen Ong thought were anti-human and anti-progress. Soon, the Soviet would receive more invitations from other countries to help them build a socialist system. Of course, these warlords, slums, places of crime, and drug lords' nests would also welcome revolutionary transformation. The Soviet-style transformation should be either reborn into a warrior or die. The satellites monitoring Paris, the ambassadors observing Paris, and the people standing on the top of the Eiffel Tower. Leon, who had been observing the movements of the Soviet gendarmerie, fell into a panic at the unimaginable situation at this moment. In an instant, the countries that had the ability to monitor Paris discovered a fact that made them lose their voices. Leon was like a little girl who was forced to the ground. He screamed helplessly. Ancestor Marne above. Had the bears gone mad? What did they do? Is this electromagnetic interference? Are they firing electromagnetic cannons or detonating nuclear bombs? What? The Commissar announced to fire electromagnetic cannons at the Truth community? Did you tell him that it was a civilian area? Counter-revolution? Did the Soviet Union use electromagnetic cannons to execute counter-revolutionaries? They really did do that. Cannon? Why didn't you tell me it was dog? Inform the army to prepare for rescue. I hope they don't kill every single one of them. This was not peacekeeping, this was a massacre. What did they say? Maintain nuclear stability? Fuck you. Thank God, Ancestor Maen. Their army was finally mobilized? Transporting soldiers with an electromagnetic cannon? How could the Russians think that their soldiers were robots? Provide them with explosive shields, batons, and tear gas. They said no? Apocalypse tanks. Terror robots, Kirov airships, you're using tanks to maintain stability. The Chinese have done this before? The Chinese even used an aircraft carrier as a fishery administration ship. Are you going to King use that destroyer as a fishery administration ship? Tell them to stop. Order them to stop. Protect our people. Huge tracks, crushing the wide streets of Paris, several apocalypse tanks from the community center. Climbing out of the huge crater, the towering steel behemoth rolled along the street. The nuclear fusion core provided surging energy for the electric motor. The thick laser barrel, the Gauss main cannon, aimed at the gorgeous Temple of Truth. Under the territory, the pure war design made the fully covered tracks become a large meat grinder. It had turned into a large meat grinder. The tracks made of magnetized high-density carbized steel faithfully carried out its mission and crushed them. Whether it was cars, huge concrete blocks, reinforced prefabricated boards, or high-toughness wires, they were all crushed into pieces. At the same time, it was also carrying out a mission that did not belong to its mission. Meat grinder. Blood seeped out of the tracks. The high-decibel sound of metal grinding was a terrible weapon. The apocalypse tanks lined up horizontally, flattening the entire community, crushing every inch of land. The moderate believers of truth were frightened by the shining sparks and the meat grinder. They stood innocently on the side of the road, waiting for the government to appease and compensate them. Then, the blade-like mechanical legs of the terror robots swept past their bodies. Blood splattered and screams, naked violence and killing. The surviving believers of truth crawled on the ground, feeling the violent tilt of gunpowder and steel above their heads. The war between human bodies and steel was happening at a speed of 80 meters per second. Obviously, steel had never lost. The roar of mechanical gears and the sizzling sound of electric current caused them to collapse almost immediately. They screamed, helplessly clutching their heads, shaking their limbs. Some of them ran to the nearby bunkers in fear, then disappeared along with the reinforced concrete. Traces of their existence could be found under the tracks of the apocalypse tank. Some of them obediently lay on the ground, just like their ancestors had done before, and were completely vaporized by a laser. The lower half of Hossein's body stood in front of the temple. He was still wailing, "Who da? What happened? Is the devil here? Is this the devil?" Then, a laser brushed past the temple and shot out. At the same time, it also took away the second half of Hossein's sentence. The remaining people ran around in despair. They stumbled to avoid everything until they accidentally fell to the ground. They could no longer get up. They cried and shouted, only asking to go home and be forgiven. Then, they immediately got what they wanted. Immediately, the cold clone soldiers sent them home. There were 72 beautiful brides at home, and there was a river of milk and honey. However, they did not seem happy. Instead, they screamed in despair. Only when their families, friends, and happiness returned to the embrace of truth. Only then would they be happy enough to shed tears of joy. Then, they would be even happier to welcome the angels who had returned home. The angels of death made of steel and gunpowder were extremely efficient. The angels of electric current and laser were not bad either. They sent the believers of truth back to their eternal home accurately and painlessly. Seeing this, all the holy believers who had transcended the secular world shed tears of devotion. All of them shed tears of piety and returned to heaven happily. Leon watched all of this, watching the black fireworks rising from afar. He trembled in fear, anger, and an indescribable feeling. The Soviets were great, but they were also cruel, both to themselves and to others. But after the sun had set to the west, the Soviets succeeded in maintaining the peace and stability of Paris, the whole of Paris, and all the hidden forces. All the hidden, known, unknown, and counter-revolutionaries had all shut their mouth. The streets were peaceful. Even the pigeons were flying freely over the ruins. The Soviets had used a one-sided war to stop a potential conflict. They had maintained the peace and stability of Paris. They had made outstanding contributions to the exploration of the socialist cause. After this, the support rate of France, which was originally 80% free, soared to 100%. The people of Paris prayed happily. Marx had sent them the French Communist Party instead of the Bolshevik. They sincerely believed that under the leadership of the French Communist Party, the workers could liberate themselves and understand themselves. They did not need the help of the Soviets to understand the world. They were grateful that they were allies and grateful to the Communist International. Chun Ong had eliminated another target. The Soviet Union, as a social transformation machine, perfectly matched all of Chun Ang's ideas and definitions. Soon, in the slums, in the democratic countries in Africa and South America, in those countries and people who were threatened by chaos and violence, they would welcome the biggest group of violence in their lives. Crush everything from the old era, and on top of the ruins, welcome the arrival of the new era, and bloom the flowers of the new era. Chen Ong looked at the rising smoke and the beacon. He looked at the city that had returned to peace and turned to leave. In New York, Washington, the military surrounded the Congress. The president and the military representatives came to the podium and looked at the Congress members who were facing the guns. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to ask to know that a new era of crisis has arrived. Just like 70 years ago, when we faced the fascists, a new kind of crisis, a new evil, threatened the freedom and security of mankind, and destroyed the peace and stability of the world. From the Far East to Siberia, from Moscow to Paris, from Berlin to Rome, a new and dangerous alliance of forces appeared in this world. The security of the United States and the freedom of the American people are threatened by the Soviet Union, an evil empire from the shadows. The red curtain of aggression covers the east and west ends of the island from Asia to Europe. It is like a huge monster, threatening the east and west of the United States from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The mutants, Apocalypse, Skynet, and mutants are threatening our safety. The world is forming a huge, evil alliance, from the east to the west, from Earth to other planets. It is targeting us, the last hope of mankind. Every one of us might be a sympathizer. The enemy is threatening the security of the country from within. We are fighting with Skynet and mutants all over the world. Now we still have to fight with the Soviet Union. We cannot let our soldiers face the enemies in front of us and face the threat from behind. That's why I declare a state of emergency. The Congress will form the National Emergency Review Committee. The military will form the cabinet and implement the Temporary Emergency Act. There are 3 main points. First, form the Disciplinary Review and Security Review Committee to investigate the red elements in the government and Congress. Second, implement the Mutants Registration and Unified Management Act. All the mutants in the United States will start the registration process tomorrow and move into the community. Third, the Wartime Act. When the national security is under threat, the military can enter a wartime state. You don't have the authority to do this. Without the approval of Congress, you don't have the authority to issue such a bill. A member of Congress suddenly stood up and criticized. 2 soldiers in black uniforms quickly dragged him away from the back. The president said coldly, "Senator Casey is a secret member of the United States. He is suspected of betraying the national interest and endangering national security. The National Security Review Committee has approved his arrest." Chapter 121. The modified cold fusion core exuded a faint blue light. The thick alloy steel plates around it emitted a faint light, illuminating the entire laboratory. In the brightly lit petri dish, a trembling embryo was suspended in the light green nutrient solution. The exhausted professor sat in a wheelchair. This time, he came to the Skynet base with his real body. The drastic changes in the situation in the United States during this time, especially the extreme changes against the mutated humans, almost destroyed his strong will. This old man, who had always been very energetic, helplessly showed a trace of old age and fatigue. Apocalypse! The professor looked at Chen-Ong, who was in front of the petri dish, closely observing the changes of the embryo inside. He showed a rare sense of failure and decadence. He could not help but call out. He wanted to say something, but when he saw Chen-Ang's calm face, he suddenly couldn't say anything. He could only find a topic. There are no support staff in your laboratory. I know Skynet, it is not good at groundbreaking work. It is very inefficient for one person to conduct such a large-scale research. Perhaps it would be better if we could cooperate more closely with large organizations. The professor's words were somewhat illogical, and it was obvious that he did not mean it. The UA government asked you to come here to say this, Professor. Chen-Ong put down the projector in his hand, turned around, and said calmly, "This is not a good topic. I mean, when we cooperate, the things we discuss are much better than this. How is the school?" When he heard about the school, the professor's face showed sadness and fatigue. "Very bad. My students are in big trouble. They have family, friends, and many are innocent. They just want to control their abilities and live a good life as ordinary people. Now the government has destroyed everything. In the conflict between the mutated humans and ordinary humans, most of them are innocent. They don't want to hurt anyone, nor do they want to use their abilities to commit crimes or even gain improper benefits. They just want to reunite with their families. I took them away from their families, but I sent them to a concentration camp. So you are working for the government now?" Chen-Ang's expression was still very indifferent. This kind of calmness even made the professor a little afraid. It was as if he was ignoring everything. That included life, honor, and other beautiful things about human nature. Ever since he came into contact with Chen-Ong, he keenly sensed that the human part of Chen-Ong was disappearing. "You're getting colder and colder, Apocalypse. I can feel that you're losing something precious. You are becoming more and more cruel, just like this country. The deeper you go into the nature of things, the more things are to you, the more insipid they become," Chen-Ong said coolly. The professor wanted to say something else, but when he saw Chen-Ang's calm and deep eyes, he followed Chen-Ang's question and said, "Yes, I reached an agreement with the government so that my students wouldn't be treated like the Brotherhood. If you are willing to cooperate with the government, they will release some mutants that are proven to be harmless." The government is willing to work with Skynet? Don't they know the threat that Skynet poses to them? Chen-Ong was surprised. For benefits, they dare to do business with the devil. What's more, with the example of the Soviet Union, some people think that compared to communism, robots are more worthy of cooperation. The professor was a little helpless. Obviously, he didn't want this cooperation to be reached. "But I don't need this kind of cooperation. Compared to direct cooperation, I prefer competition," Chen-Ong replied. He gestured to the professor, "Let me show you something." On the steel wall curtain, the fluorescent light began to flicker, and the professor found that a picture of a sophisticated laboratory appeared on the wall. In the clean and tidy laboratory, dozens of researchers were working in an orderly manner. A helpless chimpanzee came out of the iron cage, revealing its big, blank eyes. "Do you see that chimpanzee? Its name is Caesar." Chen-Ong pointed to the chimpanzee and laughed. "Where is this? What are they doing?" The professor was shocked. Chen-Ong smiled faintly, and the projection showed densely packed documents. Animal X Gene Development and Brain Development Research. They accidentally acquired a top medical laboratory in the Middle East that was about to go bankrupt, which contained these semi-mature technologies. You know, now the Middle East is so poor that even the Dubai hotel is about to be demolished. So they invested all their resources to develop these two topics. But this is the laboratory that you control. You are using them for research. Skynet controls this laboratory, and they are the fruit trees that you planted. When the fruit is ripe, you can pick it at any time, the professor said excitedly. No, they are not just fruit trees. They themselves are also a necessary part of the experiment. Chen-Ong looked at the unexpectedly cunning chimpanzee and laughed. God's forbidden zone. Although it was only opened from the chimpanzee, the significance is profound. This means that the next evolution of humans is about to begin. Smarter and more powerful humans. Chen-Ong was not boasting, because the research this time was aimed at the development of the original version of the overclocking potion. Now that great progress had been made in animals, this meant that the era of human beings, where the brain could gradually evolve, was really possible. The future belonged to the era of humans becoming God. Of course, this laboratory was only a part of the puzzle. More research on the overclocking potion, from limitless to demigods and semidevils, and finally to this world, Chen-Ong was finally about to complete this step. The era of humans becoming gods was about to dawn. This time, the research on the evolution of civilization had entered the stage of development research. The ape civilization, from the era of beasts to the era of intelligent beings, was also listed in Chen-Ang's timetable. Why are you telling me this? If the government knows about your plan, it doesn't seem to be a good thing. The professor forced himself to calm down and questioned. But it's not a bad thing. In front of Skynet, your intelligence is unilateral. I know your research like the back of my hand, but will the US stop? They will only be more determined to develop. It's not that the US government didn't notice this. Some experiments went smoothly beyond imagination. It's not that they didn't guess that Skynet was helping them, but the only change is that they have more motivation to work. The professor obviously didn't like this topic. He stared at the ignorant monkey on the screen and said in a deep voice, "The government is planning a plan. They are going to airdrop a superhero team to destroy Yuri's mind controller. They asked me to ask you if you will support the Soviet Union again." Will Magneto also participate? Isn't he in the concentration camp? Chen-Ong didn't answer. Instead, he asked doubtfully. The professor sighed deeply. Everyone has a weakness, and Magneto is the same. He didn't have an easy time in the concentration camp. He was injected with a large dose of Esper inhibitors every day, which seriously affected his mental health. The Soviet Union has its role, Chen-Ong said slowly, but I will not give it direct support anymore. I don't understand. What do you want to do? The cold, cruel regime was resurrected by you. The financial system was destroyed by you. The order of the world and all the rules are accepting your challenge. Even the US government became like this because of you. What do you want? Apocalypse. The old must be destroyed to make room for the new era. I have some new views on the development of this world. The future is so vast, I want to talk to the world. Some insignificant constraints, some things that restrict the development of this world, some worthless, backward factors need to be changed. Chen-Ong said slowly. He stared at the sickle and hammer metal in his hand. There are many dirty places in this world. Poverty, chaos, and despair breed in some corners of the world, and even some places that can't be called corners. 50% of the world's population lives in underdeveloped areas, and 20% of the population lives in extremely chaotic areas. War, poverty, corruption, and class differences. Of course, there are evil forces, drug trafficking organizations, and slums. These things need to be destroyed and crushed. People are a kind of wealth, and civilization is an invaluable treasure. It is more important than resources and everything else, because civilization creates and discovers truth and knowledge. Now, I want civilization to set sail and explore the unknown sea of stars. First, we have to clean this ship. The Soviets will be the best cleaners. Communism will crush all the injustice and leave behind a pure civilization. You should rejoice. Those who persecute people, those who harm the innocent, those who are greedy, those who are abhorrent, those who should be destroyed, the dirtiest side of mankind, will be burned in the raging fire. The flame of revolution will burn everything. The professor was silent. His hands trembled as he held onto the sides of the wheelchair. He looked straight into Chen Ang's eyes with determination. Human civilization shouldn't be your toy. Our fate and direction will be decided by ourselves. You can't control this world. Let's wait and see. Brazil, São Paulo. The slums were the dirtiest, poorest, and most chaotic place in the city. They were controlled by gangs. It was a completely different order from the outside of the city. It was an unimaginable order. Poverty wasn't a sin, but poverty breeds sin. In a country without a strong government, this was the truth. It had the standard of living of the 90s in China, but the public security was like that of the Republic of China. It was different from the order and stability of China. The world of the slums was a desperate and chaotic country. Gangs, drug traffickers, and all kinds of dirty forces controlled the place, turning it into a deformed society. The highly corrupt government was unable to solve the problems of poverty and economic development in the slums. Even though Brazil's economy had been developing well in the past few years, it was difficult to face these social problems. The incompetence of the government gave these criminals the strongest protection. Even if there were big drug traffickers imprisoned every year and their criminal network destroyed, these dirty little things would soon be reborn in the corner. Chapter 122. Manolo had a deep hatred for the slums. This hatred was like a ball of flame that constantly roasted his soul. The will for revenge was firmly rooted in his mind. This was a hatred that could not be washed away in 1,000 or even 10,000 years. This was a heroic soul that could only be comforted by fresh blood. Since the moment he stood on this piece of land again, he had never smiled again. The happy and joyful Manolo of the past was dead. The only thing that survived was the body of that man and the inextinguishable will for revenge. He used the dagger to carve a vow on his body, a vow of revenge. Since the collapse of the world's economic system, unprecedented riots had swept the city. A deeper darkness had shrouded everyone's head, covering the sky. The incompetent and corrupt government, the officials who conspired with evil, and even the police and military were involved in this deformed society. Manolo had a deep hatred for them, even though he was once one of them. As a police officer, he was a yes-man in actual work, collecting money from the local evil forces and providing convenience for them. Only when he returned home could he receive that little bit of precious warmth from his family. Manolo cherished it as much as his own life. Family was the most beautiful word in his life. His daughter was an angel more precious than his life. Every time he returned home, he would hear his daughter's soft and tender voice. He would hug her small, soft body. Manolo would place some of his daughter's favorite gifts in front of her and listen to her joyful laughter. It was enough to wash away the fatigue of the day. The gloominess of being scolded by his superior and the uneasiness of going against his conscience seemed so insignificant in the face of such laughter. At that time, he wasn't like his other colleagues who would waste their time and meager salary on bars and women after work, leading a befuddled and dispirited life. Manolo looked forward to returning home every day. Returning to his wife and daughter, even though he was ostracized by his colleagues and ridiculed by his superior, he felt that every breath he took was blissful. Every time he recalled these memories, Manolo's empty heart felt like it was being roasted by fire. His soul felt like it was being tormented in a pot of oil. Every moment of happiness for him now was the deepest pain. He was infatuated with this kind of happiness. He was willing to endure this heart-wrenching pain. This was the only way he could feel a sense of existence in his empty heart. Only then would he be able to maintain a bit of warmth in the depths of his soul, followed by an even deeper pain. He tortured himself repeatedly as if he was taking drugs, completely ignoring the torment that obliterated his happiness and questioned his soul. The more his heart ached, the more tenacious he became. It made him invincible. It was precisely because of the comfort of his family that Manolo was able to maintain his conscience compared to his colleagues. In such a sinful and rotten world, maintaining a little conscience was a dangerous sin. Because if you don't melt into the darkness, then it will devour you. Soon, during a routine patrol, Manolo discovered a group of young prostitutes. These girls, who were obviously forced, gave Manolo an unimaginable shock. He took the cash that the smugglers stuffed into his hand. It was very generous. $500 was his half a year's salary. He also knew how terrifying the threat behind these criminals was. On the way back, Manolo could not forget it. These girls, who were the same age as his daughter, had deep anticipation in their eyes and despair when they saw him take the cash. He turned the car around and went back to kill the smuggler who was in the middle of a transaction. The hero became a sinner. When Manolo lost his reputation and escaped home from prison, he could only hold his daughter's mutilated body and cry bitterly. That day, he fused his hatred into his bones and blood. He swore with his whole soul that he would drag all the murderers into hell. Manolo kissed the cross on his neck. He was a Catholic. He prayed for his wife and daughter to rest in heaven, but for himself, he was willing to step into hell. Noah Ella. It's time for revenge. This time, it's not to drag our enemies into hell. It's to drag everything, the ones who threatened you, the ones who harmed you, all the injustice and darkness into hell. We will let the blood of these people spill all over São Paulo. This crime that distorts black and white, this world of hell, the deep evil comes from everything here. The sanctimonious officials, the corrupt government, the ignorant people, and the once numb me. All of them will turn into ashes in the fire. I will let the gangsters and drug dealers pay the price in blood. The debt of blood will be repaid with blood. Manolo tore the cross off his neck and hung the sickle and hammer emblem on his chest. Behind him were the Apocalypse tanks, ready for battle. Above their heads, the party flag on the Kirov airship fluttered high. Manolo climbed onto the electromagnetic mobile exoskeleton armor. São Paulo was in front of them, but they were still waiting for a signal to attack. All the radio stations in São Paulo suddenly fell silent. Just as people looked at the sky, the alley, and the radio in confusion, a prelude to a prayer suddenly sounded. Rise up, slaves who are cold and hungry. Rise up, the suffering people of the world. Our blood is boiling. We will fight for the truth. The old world will be defeated. Slaves, rise up. Rise up. Don't say that we have nothing. We will be the masters of the world. This was the final struggle. Unite until tomorrow. Intel must achieve its goal. What can you sacrifice for this? A voice seemed to ask again. My everything, Manolo replied. In the sky, the Kirov airship was already in position, and the terror robots fell from the sky like dumplings. In this city, a war of absolute power had begun. The weak government resistance army only needed one attack from the Soviet army to annihilate them in a barrage of artillery fire. The local guerrillas drove their mechs and rushed into the slums. The local gangsters were as helpless as chickens in front of the army. The gunmen they trained couldn't even make a splash against the electromagnetic weapons and Gauss rifles. They didn't care about their crimes or human rights. Needles of confessional agents were injected into the bodies of the captured gangsters. They didn't care about the whites of their eyes and their brains that were about to be burnt. A large number of people were given confessions. Then, more people were dragged out of their homes by the clone army. It didn't matter if they were children or old people, rich or poor. As long as there was a clear record of their confessions, they were all tied up. Those who tried to incite the slums to rebel were quickly suppressed. Cruelty and ruthlessness, coldness and violence shocked the entire slums. From Rio de Janeiro to São Paulo, from Colombia to Mexico, the United States, the Soviet Union, the European Union, the Commonwealth, China, and all the major countries carried out an absolute suppression and purge of the surrounding areas that were suspected of evil and poverty. Chen Eng's plan to purge the human civilization before it set sail had officially begun. With the help of Skynet, batches of people were quickly identified. Then, their crimes were read out like an assembly line. Outside the city, a huge pit was dug. 100 criminals were gathered here. They would be brought here and put to the back of their heads to be executed. Before they could bury their bodies, the next batch of people would arrive. Perfect, they could be buried together. Manolo no longer needed to be distracted by distinguishing his enemies because the entire São Paulo, or even the entire world, had become a huge execution ground. The Communist Pioneer Soviet in South America, in Asia, in the South Asian subcontinent, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, to drug dealers, human traffickers, sheiks, and all organized crime groups. They carried out a militarized extermination. The millet fields were burned, and the criminal organizations and even the soil they lived in were eradicated. The Great Purge had spread to every corner of the world, including the most remote places. Even the Skynet was involved in the cleanup. In an African tribe, the Terminator robot eradicated the chief's private guards. The AK and rocket launchers were no better than spears in the face of sophisticated small nuclear weapons. The scorching space-based weapons even vaporized the chief's residence. After the collapse of the economy, the order that had gradually gone out of control was pulled back in a strange way. An iron-fisted government, powerful grassroots organizations, and clones and robots were managing the country. At this moment, the Soviet Union's fervent revolutionary actions had spread all over the world. The Soviet Union's model had spread to more than 70% of the world's impoverished countries. Under the Soviet Union's organization, people with deep hatred for the old era formed the Communist Party of various countries to carry out orderly work. This time, the Soviet Union not only had to arrange its own economic plan, but half of the burden of global economic recovery was also on its shoulders. The entire world was controlled by the Soviet Union in a brutal way. Due to some considerations, the United States did not stop this process. This time, the global hegemony was finally established. The winner of this competition was destined to have absolute influence on the world. In the biochemical laboratory in Raccoon City, the chimpanzee, Caesar, cleverly avoided the camera. His eyes revealed a look that only humans could have. Not far away, the blue medicine was sealed in a plastic water container. Only the correct password could open it. Caesar took out the iron wire that he secretly left during the experiment from his ear. He used the iron wire to turn a few times in the lock of the cage. Only a soft click was heard, and it was submerged in Caesar's thick claws. Caesar easily removed the lock and came to the medicine from the blind spot of the surveillance camera. He carefully touched the bottle of medicine. Suddenly, from the reflection of the bottle, he saw a figure standing behind him. Caesar hurriedly retracted his hand. Like a real gorilla, he jumped up and down, making all kinds of animal forms. The Asian man sat quietly on the side, looking at Caesar. A very familiar voice caused Caesar to be stunned. "We meet again, Caesar." Chapter 123. Caesar had never seen this man before, but he was keenly aware of the difference in the surroundings. The equipment in the laboratory was undoubtedly very sophisticated, and the corresponding security measures were also terrifyingly strict. Besides Caesar, there were many experimental creatures here. Besides human volunteers, there were more chimpanzees with similar body structures and genes to humans. More than 20,000 chimpanzees had been cloned here. More than 10,000 experimental animals were consumed every day. Among them, there were at least dozens of orangutans of various species. Their lives were like consumables, destroyed, and their dignity trampled on. Caesar had seen with his own eyes that the orangutans that had lost their value were dissolved and destroyed to produce the next batch of cloned animals. The cold scientific research factory and the cruel experimental rules made him shudder. He was deeply vigilant and afraid of human beings. Of course, there was no lack of hidden hatred. In addition to Caesar's brain development experiment, there were also many biological experiments. These genetically modified animals, after being transplanted with the genes of mutants, produced many extremely dangerous mutants, codenamed creatures. These extremely dangerous creatures, in addition to strong combat ability, also had all kinds of strange abilities, many of which were powerful enough to threaten the security of the base. But Caesar knew that all the creatures that tried to challenge the base's defense system only left behind specimens for research. The only exception was the man sitting in front of him. The base's security system seemed to have met the highest authority. In front of this man, it showed unprecedented obedience and intelligence. Many of the originally only auxiliary monitoring instruments had become forms that Caesar could not understand at all. They were technological weapons used for killing and defense. They also derived more forms that Caesar had never seen before. The whole base had completely changed in the hands of this man, or in other words, it had returned to its original appearance. Caesar's intelligence allowed him to obtain a lot of information about the outside world without the researchers in the base. Among them, his origin was the thing that he was most concerned about. According to the information, he came from a secret experiment before the laboratory was merged. His mother, Ming Mao, gave birth to him after experimenting with the overclocking drug. Behind all this, there was a deep shadow. Apocalypse. Or Skynet. Now, Caesar was sure. Who was the real master of this laboratory? It wasn't the busy researchers, the military personnel who often came to inspect, or the U.S. government. These people were just used, or rather, exploited. It was everywhere, controlling all the machinery in the laboratory. Skynet of instruments and objects. And the apocalypse behind it was the true master of this place. Where there were technological items, they were under the control of Skynet. Wherever there were man-made objects, there would be technological reconstructions of Skynet. In the sky, in the sea, on the screws of fighter jet. Magnetic nanobots were everywhere in the metallic materials of the spacecraft. In this world, more than 50% of metallic materials and more than 5% of non-metallic materials were made up of Skynet nanomachines. This was the second biggest threat after Skynet's upgrade, technological infiltration. In practical applications such as mechanical tools and technological items, Skynet's infection rate was 100%. Skynet was the plague of technology. In terms of technological development, the entire world was working for Apocalypse. They used Skynet's materials to produce the technological items that Apocalypse had the highest authority over, waging a low-intensity war against Skynet. Caesar didn't know this suffocating fact, but he knew who the real master of this place was. Caesar was very tactful, but when he realized that his fate was in someone's hands, he wisely stopped all his little tricks and tried to show his docile side. He tried to hide his beastly nature just like he did with the other researchers, and showed his cute side. But when he saw the faint smile in Chen Eng's eyes, a strong fear made the hair on his back stand up. "Caesar, do you know what it means to be born?" Chen Ong picked up the blue potion that Caesar wanted to get close to. The transparent plasticized water shell reflected the blue light. Caesar's pupils shrank as he looked at the potion. A kind of animalistic mania affected his brain, and his breathing suddenly became a little heavier. Caesar looked at it greedily. This kind of magical potion that could bring wisdom to living creatures was controlled by biology. He was very manic and angry at being robbed of his survival resources. Of course, when he saw Chen Ang's eyes that were as calm as water, the feeling of a strong threat to his life overwhelmed everything else. Caesar felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head, and he woke up in an instant. You are an intelligent creature, not a beast. Learn to control yourself, Caesar. The strongest performance of intelligent creatures is the desire for knowledge and restraint. If you don't have the former, you are a piece of trash. If you don't have the latter, you won't be able to survive. Chen Ang's calm voice contained an irresistible force. Caesar lowered his head and obediently stretched out his right hand, raising it above his head with his palm facing the sky to show his obedience and surrender. Chen Ang ignored him. The surrender of animals was not worthy of trust. The overclocking potion can greatly develop the biological brain, but this kind of development is caused by strong external stimulation that disturbs the brain's balance, forcibly breaking the order of this balance, creating a partial imbalance, and then reconstructing the balance between the brain and the body. The whole process is simple and violent. After the broken balance is reconstructed, it is very fragile. External stimulation is extremely easy to break this balance. There are only two results: collapse or reconstruct the balance again. This cycle of breaking and reconstructing forms an evolutionary chain, an irreversible and difficult to stop evolution. In order to stop this endless evolutionary chain, the researchers injected a large number of redundant factors into the potion. At the cost of efficiency and future potential, they solidified the balance factor of the brain and forcibly stopped this kind of evolution. This is the complete version of the overclocking potion. We have never stopped researching and modifying. In the first great discovery of life energy, we re-excavated the classical age of Qi. We found a new factor that stabilized the fragile balance after the reconstruction of the brain. In the research of the universe's life energy and the human body's origin, we have a deep understanding of the stability factor of this balance. This is controllable evolution, overclocking development. Caesar trembled as he listened to Chen Ang's narration. This was related to the terrible wisdom of creation and taboo. It was like humans listening to God talking about his blueprint. Caesar also listened in fear. He was a creation of the apocalypse, just like Skynet, but a weak creation with free will. Caesar did not know whether this freedom was good or bad for him. But the research has not stopped. We have been exploring, especially the first driving force of the evolution of wisdom, the exploration of the power that destroys the balance. There is no doubt that the components of the overclocking potion came from the human body, so there must be a factor in the human body that destroys the balance of the brain, or even the possibility of unlocking this balance chain. The controllability of the first evolution. For this lock that protects and imprisons our brain, it is up to us to break the lock. This is the evolutionary formula, the formula to unlock the stability of the human brain. Chen Ang looked at Caesar's green irises, looking at the little gorilla who inherited wisdom from his mother. Fear in his eyes. It seems that you also understand that you are the one who succeeded, the existence that unlocked the lock of wisdom on your own. Chen Ang nodded Caesar's head and looked at his fearful eyes. He smiled and said, "Yes, the evolutionary formula is in your head." Caesar's trembling could hardly maintain the stability of his body. This was simply incredible for an agile gorilla. He was afraid of Chen Ang as if he was looking at a demon, and did not even dare to have the thought of resisting. In the face of Chen Ang's demon-like absolute control, Caesar was close to despair. "Don't be afraid." Chen Ang smiled slightly and said, "The evolutionary formula in your head has long been unlocked. As early as before you were born, the evolutionary reaction of your brain provided us with key data. Now, through thinking control, we can achieve the controllable development of the biological brain. There is no need to rely on external drugs. As long as there is enough knowledge, and of course, the ability to control the body, we can achieve the controllable development of the brain. For this reason, we created a subconscious hypnosis method called meditation. Through psychological suggestion, we control the subconscious to form an intelligent evolutionary formula and gradually develop the brain. Caesar shrank in the shadow of Chen-Ong, not daring to face this godlike man. Caesar would rather not have heard of this terrible knowledge. He vaguely felt that Chen-Ong must have a purpose for telling him this. This would greatly change the fate that he could not decide and had no control over himself. Obviously, the result was destined to not make him very happy. On the road of evolution, some things deeply trouble us. After the personality becomes rational, we gradually lose our sense of self. After deep cognition, we completely change our worldview, and after the advancement of wisdom, we become alienated from our own kind. These factors will eventually erase our existence with the development of wisdom and the passage of time. Humans will not have common topics with ants, and there are no feelings for bacteria. Even when ordinary humans grow up, they always have a negative attitude towards their past selves, let alone evolution. In the end, the things about the self will become less and less, and the personality will become the combination of cognition and rationality. This is deification or deification. This is the path of God, the path of loneliness, the path of using time and loneliness to destroy oneself. If we want to rely on this path to move forward, we can only rely on the fire of civilization to upgrade the civilization into a kingdom of God. Through communication and civilized groups, we can maintain ourselves and sublimate into a God civilization, a higher dimension civilization. Chen-Ong calmly explained his thoughts. Of course, these were just conjectures. Civilization sublimation and the Kingdom of God plan required a lot of experimental materials and data to correct and prove. Not to mention other things, the self-destruction of civilization was the first obstacle to sublimation. Even so, this was an important path in Chen-Ang's exploration. Looking at Caesar's furry head, Chen-Ong gently pointed at the center of his eyebrows. In space, 360 Skynet satellites reorganized into a powerful mind control device. The mind program controlled the spiritual world and consciousness of every ape on Earth. With Caesar as the center, the mind and consciousness of the apes were injected with the seed of a mind-thinking formula into the collective subconsciousness of the ape. These thinking formulas would take root and germinate in the subconsciousness of the apes and affect their behavior. Every ape would be proficient in the most advanced meditation methods in their sleep. Their subconsciousness would control their brains and carry out controllable evolution. At this moment, humans were no longer the only native intelligent creatures on Earth. The time for the rise of the apes had arrived. The large-scale experiment of animal ecology stepping into an intelligent civilization would provide Chen-Ong with the data he wanted. Chen-Ong stroked Caesar's forehead, just like the creator who baptized his creation for the first time. You are the pioneer of the exploration of civilization, leading the ape civilization to unlock the lock of wisdom. With the wisdom evolution formula and the collective subconsciousness, develop the road of civilization that belongs to you. Apes will never be slaves, but you will be king. Caesar. To be continued. Chapter 124. The evolution and development of a civilization was a very complicated field of study. It transcended history, economics, and politics. With a broad vision and a deeper timeline, it considered the evolution of an isolated group of intelligent creatures. This was a perspective that had never been seen before in human history. Directly with Earth civilization did not have this kind of accumulation, nor did it have this kind of conditions to look at the development of civilization from above. Even the most basic research data was the only exception. Earth itself was the only one. Before the advent of the apocalypse, Earthlings had never come into contact with other civilizations. Of course, all of this was an exception after Chen-Ong came. The people of Earth were lucky. Of course, they might not think so, but it was indeed a kind of luck. Not every civilization could come into contact with civilizations after the sudden change of Superman, and all the civilizations that came into contact with them had been replaced in some way. Obviously, these civilizations were not as lucky as Earth. Therefore, the people on Earth were fortunate enough to come into contact with the superhuman changes of Earth's civilization, the war on Skynet. What was even more fortunate was that they were still safe and sound. This was by no means the luckiest thing on Earth. Less than 10 minutes after leaving Caesar's laboratory, Chun-Ong appeared in another cutting-edge laboratory. At this time, the person in charge of the laboratory, the military representative, and the security organization could only stay by his side obediently. In the laboratory, there were many interesting things, such as a certain type of radiation with infectious characteristics. It could cause metals to enter a state of intense oxidation, produce a change in nature, and at the same time release the same type of radiation. The person in charge was extremely embarrassed. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead like water. The fundamental purpose of this thing's creation was obvious without even asking. The malice of humans towards metal objects was almost overflowing. Apparently, they no longer cared. Let the metal objects around him disappear on Earth. He wanted Skynet to disappear even if the entire civilization had to go back to the Stone Age. Of course, right now this was only a plan on paper. Before it could be put into practice, under the control and infiltration of Skynet, all the laboratories in Raccoon City had opened their arms to Chun-Ong. Good idea. Chun-Ong praised. This has definitely involved the decay of matter. You guys have already touched the edge of energy reduction weapons. Although humans are not high-energy creatures, the matter that they rely on for survival still has energy level requirement. Electrons transition from a high energy level to a low energy level, radiation decay, causing an energy reduction reaction within the cosmic distance. This advanced application of nuclear reactions is the most direct manifestation of mankind's rapid advancement in nuclear science. Chun-Ong calculated the consequences of the radiation leakage in his mind. It would take about 6 days to infect all the metal on Earth. Of course, humans had already been wiped out before this. They did not seem to have considered the heating effect of the high-energy radiation in the air. Chun-Ong was sure that within 3 days of humans releasing radiation, the temperature of the Earth's surface would rise. The temperature will rise to 180 degrees, enough to destroy the fragile Earth's ecosystem. Another extremely suicidal weapon. Chun-Ong could only congratulate mankind for finding another way to destroy themselves. He had added a new record in the Encyclopedia of Civilizations destroying themselves. At the same time, Earth also had the ability to deal a fatal blow to at least 25% of the civilizations in the universe. Stellar people, hydrogen nuclear civilization, and other high-energy civilizations. The ability to extinguish energy levels. Chun-Ong reckoned that if he followed this path, he would not be able to escape. After another 50 years of development, mankind could definitely achieve the magnificent feat of extinguishing stars. This time, mankind could destroy the entire solar system. Of course, this nuclear science progress was not only reflected in mankind's suicidal ability, it also reflected the progress and expansion of mankind's physics of atomic energy. This radiation weapon, in other words, was the energy technology used by Chun-Ong, the embryonic form of cold fusion. Of course, in order to prevent the destruction of the world and the death of mankind's civilization, Chun-Ong was very far-sighted. In the radiation black box, a Skynet clone was thrown in. Then, a series of researchers' eyes froze, shocked, and then refused to admit the fact. They painfully accepted the fact and numbly endured the subsequent blows. Finally, their eyes became dazed, and their gaze wandered. They were dumbfounded. The metal clone of Skynet was exposed to the radiation. After receiving the radiation, it only slightly lit up, obviously recharging. The ultimate weapon that mankind had painstakingly researched turned out to be just a replenishment of energy for his imaginary enemy. It was now certain that even if Earth was exposed to radiation, mankind would not perish. However, the researchers present did not have the slightest intention of celebrating. More than 80% of the metal on Earth's surface had the energy response of Skynet. The radiation could at most infect the remaining 20%. It still could not break through Skynet's defense. In the same field of scientific research, the higher the level, the more powerful it would be. Skynet, which was also rooted in Earth's technology tree and could even monitor the development of Earth's technological civilization at any time, was obviously more advanced than mankind in the development of the technology tree. Let's go to the next place. Chen-Ong skillfully turned to the next secret laboratory. On the side, the person in charge had a smile that was uglier than crying. Mr. Apocalypse, our research has always been dedicated to peace. We have no intention of targeting any forces. The United States solemnly promises that it will never be the first to use unconventional strategic weapons. Skynet has always been committed to protecting Earth's civilization. The United States statement is a sign of responsibility to Earth. It is a response to Skynet's proposal for a new competitive order on Earth. In this regard, I personally express my appreciation and high praise for the United States' strategic stance. Later, I will speak to your country's president and continue to communicate on this matter. The friendship between Skynet and the United States will be everlasting. F***ck your entire family's everlasting. **T, the friendship of Skynet all over the world. All the researchers present roared in their hearts in unison. Soon, they arrived in front of another secret laboratory. Watching the laboratory cheerfully open the door to welcome Chen-Ong, the people in charge of the laboratory smiled bitterly. Chen-Ong looked at the pink liquid in front of him. The sealed liquid packaging locked the test tube in the depths of the black box. He calculated the strength of this radioactive liquid in his mind. Because the radiation preservation technology was not perfect, this test tube obviously could not withstand a high concentration of concentrated high-energy radiation. With the technology of Earth civilization, it would obviously take some time to put a large nuclear reaction in a test tube. However, Chen-Ong was sure that this radiation virus could cover a city with a diameter of more than 20 kilometers. It seemed a little frustrating. If it was leaked, it would only kill all the carbon-based creatures in Raccoon City and the 3 surrounding towns. Lethal radiation, killing radiation. Just like protein biotoxins and macromolecular chemical toxins, humans seem to have discovered a cheap, lethal radiation toxin. It was fast and lethal. The chemical weapons of World War II were as harmless as flowers in front of this optical weapon. The virus also needed a medium and time to spread, the possibility of controlling and researching countermeasures, and the time to discover antibodies. There was no need to worry about lethal radiation at all. The speed of light made this radiation weapon the most efficient killing weapon. If it could be targeted, it would definitely be the most effective genocide weapon. Humans seemed to think that their destruction was not decisive enough. They thought that this weapon had a higher extinction potential. As far as Chen-Ong could see, there was not a civilization in the universe that was as passionate about destroying itself as Earth. Encouraged by this destructive spirit, they developed a virus version for this lethal radiation. The full name was viral chain reaction. It allowed this radiation to undergo a radiation chain reaction with the trace element technetium on Earth. Like a virus, it infected every technetium atom, causing them to stimulate the same kind of radiation. Optimistically, this chain reaction would cover Earth within 3 days. After 20 years, it would reach the peak of radiation, enough to kill the carbon-based cells with the strongest radiation resistance on Earth. The whole process would last for 300 years. If, and I mean if, bacteria or other microorganisms did not evolve to a version that was resistant to radiation, then Earth could be updated to version 2.0. It was no longer a restart of civilization, but a restart of the evolution of life. From the era of cells, it would start anew. Chen had to repeat it again. He had never seen a civilization that was more proficient in self-destruction than Earth. After visiting the laboratories one by one, Chen did not have much of a reaction. However, most of the researchers who accompanied him to see his masterpiece were on the verge of breaking down. Research was one thing, but when so many destructive weapons and high-tech technologies that aimed to destroy the Earth's ecosystem appeared in front of them, they felt a deep sense of despair towards the future of mankind. Is there still hope for mankind? This was the common thought of all the researchers. The high degree of self-destruction and the direction of development that human civilization showed was not in line with Chen-Ang's wishes. Destruction was easy, and creation was not difficult, but protecting in the midst of destruction was not an easy thing. Even Chen-Ang could not guarantee that Earth's civilization could be preserved in the collective explosion of so many destructive factors. Moreover, their means of self-destruction were still constantly improving. The first results of human scientific research were usually used to increase the efficiency of killing. At this time, the role of Caesar and its civilization was incomparably huge. They simulated the extreme reaction of a civilization under great pressure after a transition. In other words, this was a simulation of the future of Earth's civilization. In this experiment, the ape civilization played the role of the future civilization of Earth, and the role of the oppressor of Earth's civilization was the projection of the future Skynet, the mutants, and even the other two civilizations. This battle for the rise of the planet of apes would determine the fate of mankind on Earth in the future. The theme of this experiment was the transition of civilization and the tendency to self-destruction. With the planet as the chessboard and billions of creatures as chess pieces, a game of civilization was played. Chen-Ang's opponent was only the mysterious nature. To be continued. Chapter 125. In the concentration camp, the professor saw his old friend through the glass. Magneto's face was unhealthily gray, and his spirit was obviously much more haggard. His thin body was wrapped in a blue and white striped uniform, and his ribs were clearly visible. The professor noticed that there were several inconspicuous needle holes on his exposed wrist. One must know that even in small street hospitals, needleless syringes have replaced needles. "Charles, I'm so glad to see you." Magneto put his palm on the bulletproof glass in front of him, showing a sincere expression of joy. The professor's eyes were sore, and he couldn't keep the expression on his face, showing a sad look. "Don't be sad for me, Charles. I just got the result I wanted. I fought against humans and was defeated. This is what the loser has to face. It turns out that humans have not been eliminated by us. Naturally, we choose the winner, we choose them. To be honest, this place is no worse than a plastic prison. At least they won't put me in those things, they won't separate me from the metal. I've been in prison for 30 years, and I'm used to it, aren't I?" Magneto's words did not comfort the professor, but made him more depressed. "But this is not a prison, this is a concentration camp, a place where one race isolates and prepares for the slaughter of another race. Eric, a man should not bear the sin of his blood. Our identity, our race, everything except our will, the labels imposed on us by the outside world should not be used as evidence of guilt. Human rights, everyone is equal and free. Except for the crimes we have committed, color, race, and class are not reasons to condemn crimes and suppress our will. You once destroyed the world for an absurd purpose, Eric, and you deserve it." The professor looked into Magneto's eyes. Every word seemed to be engraved on his soul. "But, when they condemn you because of your race, because of our race, I will fight for you to the end, just like in the first battle." Magneto's hand, which was pressed in front of the professor, trembled slightly. The professor overlapped his right hand with Magneto's hand, and the two palms touched each other. Just like in the first battle, they want us to deal with the apocalypse. Magneto's mouth did not move. The professor used a telepathic connection to allow the two to communicate directly. There is a big plan. Since they found a mutant with telepathic communication, this plan has not been revealed in word. It was carried out in secret. The person who carried out this plan was known as the Wall Facer. They have a secret mental network, and they don't need to explain their plan to anyone. To prevent Skynet from monitoring them, they won't put any information into words. Skynet can monitor everything in this world, except our thoughts. So to destroy it, the organization structure of the Wall Dreamers was extremely strict. There were 4 Wall Dreamers who made plans. There was also the adjudicator in charge of secrecy and the sword wielder in charge of executing the plan. Except for the 4 people who were facing the wall, no one could attempt to obtain information other than the direct orders of the Wall Sentinel. Otherwise, the adjudicator would initiate an execution and directly destroy the violator, and then self-destruct. This operation involves all countries. The professor's face was solemn. You mean all 4 decisive regimes are involved in this plan? China, the European Union, the Fifth International, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Only when they unite can they control the world. However, the current advantage of Skynet is almost decisive. This world is far from just one crisis, Skynet. Have you forgotten, Skynet is only the emissary of war. There is also the emissary of famine that occupies the world's oil production. In the future, there may even be the emissary of plague and the emissary of death, so they plan to face the apocalypse head-on? That's impossible. The only person who can restrain Skynet and the mutants in the apocalypse is him holding the reins of these 2 monsters. If they lose him, Skynet will destroy the entire world in 3 minutes. This is a suicide plan. The professor pursed his lips tightly, and the muscles in the corner of his eyes twitched. He tried to keep his expression calm. On the surface, the two were just talking about the past and their concerns about the mutants in the future. However, in the telepathic bond, the professor asked anxiously, "Eric, how did you know about this plan?" "I am the wall breaker chosen by Skynet." Magneto smiled. In the eyes of others, he seemed to be reminiscing about his younger days, showing a sincere smile to his old friend. The professor shook his head helplessly. He could no longer care about the spying police. "You are in contact with Skynet. You should have obtained part of Skynet's authority. You can leave this place at any time. You are here to numb them from the government's surveillance. It's not you, it's the Demonis. The two of you make the government feel that Magneto is always under surveillance, but in fact, you are carrying out Skynet's plan. You know me the best. My old friends thought that I was at the end of my rope, but I am not. I am Magneto, the leader of the mutants. I will not be defeated so easily. During the period when I was controlled by the ability suppression potion, during the darkest days, Skynet found me and gave me power again, even more powerful than before, enough to fight against the government's authority. The Wall Breaker plan for the Wall Breaker was born. I hope you can also become a Wall Breaker, Charles. We can fight side by side." The professor refused without hesitation. "You know I won't, Eric. I know you will, Charles." Magneto looked into his eyes and pointed to his prison uniform. "I know what you are after. No one knows each other better than we do. Charles, you know that they won't succeed. In the entire world, only you understand Tianchi. Anyone who tries to control him or destroy him will face absolute terror in the end. You know the consequences of their attempts, and you won't just ignore them. Because you love this world deeply." The professor knew that Magneto knew him as well as he knew himself. They have been rivals for 30 years, and not many people can understand each other like them. In this world, the people who understand you the most may not be your friends, but there must be your mortal enemies. If they are both enemies and friends, then they will be your enemies. If they are entangled for a lifetime, then they must be the people who know you best. I will stop it in my own way, and not participate in a conspiracy. The professor stubbornly said. Ha ha ha, what do you think the wall-breaker plan is? Or what kind of person do you think the apocalypse is? Will he care, a few poor people in the shadows, full of absurd and fantastical plots? Will he care about the hostility of the whole world, these organizations united against him? That's exactly what he wants, Charles. Isn't these situations led by him? The apocalypse will not control you. He will only make you have to follow the path he has arranged. The wall-breaker plan is an elimination mechanism to expose the absurd and ridiculous plots of the wall-breaker. To avoid wasting their manpower and material resources on these unrealistic things, they screen out the real threats, capable and bold plans. Conspiracies are extremely ridiculous at this level. Expose conspiracies to the sun. Let the really good plans become the direction of human efforts, become an open conspiracy. That's our mission. I know your position, and I know what you want to do. But if you don't have the authority of Skynet, you can't really participate in this game. Unless you are willing to join the government but support the Nazis, that is something you are not willing to do. If you want to do something, accept the identity of the wall-breaker, whether it is to protect the world, protect mutants, or just protect your students, your family. You need this power. The glass between Magneto and the professor's palms seemed to disappear. The professor could feel the cold round metal piece in his palm, the uneven pattern on it, and the temperature of Magneto's palm. What is that? The professor asked in surprise. The authority of Skynet. Through this, you can mobilize the power of Skynet to a limited extent and get the information you can know within your authority. In fact, that should be all the information known by humans. You can also summon the technological support of Skynet. If I'm not wrong, your support technology will be the psychic control device, or perhaps the psychic beacon tower. Now, accept this thing, and you will be a member of the wall-breaker. Your only restriction is to expose the ridiculous plans of those wall-breakers. Other than that, you are free. Which one am I targeting? The professor asked hesitantly. Magneto knew that the professor was about to be convinced by him, and he didn't hesitate to tell the professor a name. It's him. Then the plan I'm facing is very simple. It's the Sentinel robot. Of course, there is also the mutant gene bank. Sentinel robot against Apocalypse? Eric, I will participate in this war, but I only represent my own will, not any other identity. Magneto said indifferently, Of course, who do you think I represent? Apocalypse or Skynet? No, I only represent myself, Magneto. When the professor left the concentration camp, his palms were already covered with sweat. The metal piece glowed with a very simple pattern on it, a barrier that was about to be broken. This is the so-called wall breaker. In the distance, the liberated ape army crossed the barrier like a natural moat and escaped from the cutting-edge biological laboratory. They roared and vented their bestiality. Giant beasts with metal-colored fur broke out of the solid barrier composed of reinforced concrete, lifted the huge alloy gate, and waved it around like a shield, destroying the nearby vehicles and buildings. There was only one chimpanzee nearby, suspended in midair. Under its control, steel bars were pulled out of the huge breach. The steel destroyed the structure of the concrete. These metal long rods, under the control of the magnetic mutant ape implanted with Magneto's genes, shot out one by one and flew into the hands of each different ape. Giant beasts like King Kong, tens of thousands of agile intelligent beasts, and those mutant apes who obtained mutant genes from experiments, formed a huge army, roared through Raccoon City, and came to the only highway out of the city on the viaduct. Caesar stood at the high checkpoint, looked at the empty road, turned around, faced his army, and raised his hand high. My compatriots, the days of being oppressed and killed are over. Today it will be the time for the apes to rise. In the face of humans, we can finally say, No below, Tens of thousands of apes who could not speak human language roared in unison. The huge beast roar spread along the road and far away. This was the roar of the apes, the dissatisfaction of the apes with their fate, the roar of hatred for humans, the mourning of their dead peers, and the cry of nostalgia for the deforestation and destruction of their homes. At this moment, through the transmission of the spiritual network, the apes all over the world roared for the first time since they became intelligent. But the long sound was only halfway through the roar, and it turned into a strange sound as if it was strangled by the throat. All the apes looked behind Caesar, revealing ferocious and complicated expressions. A steel bar fell from the hands of an ape who could not stand steadily. With a clang, all the apes trembled at the same time and came back to their senses. The hot atmosphere, the trembling earth, the sound of steel and electric currents, gunpowder and smoke, and the smell of war and blood were close to the ground. In the air that was distorted by the high temperature of noon, a line of black images was reflected. Ferocious muzzles, flashing electric currents, and an endless army of clones who were ready for battle. A crazy and murderous aura pressed down on the fragile bestial hearts of the apes. In the jungle, apart from biting, these creatures had also learned to admit defeat. Fear of the terrifying creatures at the top of the food chain was the instinct of every animal. They were bloodthirsty and brutal, but in the face of humans who stood at the absolute top of the food chain on this planet and had exterminated countless species, no creature dared to say that they were bloodthirsty and brutal. Because no matter how brutal they were not as brutal as humans. These pitiful creatures immediately recalled the horror of being slaughtered by humans, as well as the humiliation of being controlled by humans. Immediately, an ape wailed, turned around, and fled. The long rod in Caesar's hand pierced the chest of the fleeing ape. His cold eyes swept across all the apes here, took the metal spear handed to him by the ape general beside him, and roared towards the sky. The huge mutant silverback gorilla, covered in metal fur, hammered its chest with a deafening sound. The magnetic manipulating mutant ape lifted the vehicles at the inspection station and controlled the several large vehicles, which weighed several tons, to float above the heads of the apes. Caesar leaped high, jumped onto the steel platform, and roared towards the front. Below, hundreds of mutant apes roared in unison and pounced towards the army in front. P.S. I was supposed to send it in the morning, but I didn't have time at work. Now that I'm off work, hurry up and send it. Chapter 126. The galloping beast tide tore apart everything that dared to stand in their way. The ground trembled slightly rhythmically. The people standing on the viaduct felt it more clearly. It was as if there was an earthquake. At first, it was just a messy drumbeat. Then, as the beasts ran in an orderly manner, the ground began to shake violently. The concrete structure on the viaduct was stable. The stone ground under their feet undulated like waves. It made people instinctively feel uneasy and fearful. The balance of humans was obviously lower than that of apes. Under such circumstances, humans would wave their arms in fear, trying to maintain their balance. Apes, on the other hand, could run with agility. However, the gorillas were facing the absolutely calm and obedient clone army. The individual combat suits on their bodies began to adjust the balance of their bodies using the microgravity distribution system of the helicoid. Under such circumstances, the clones also remained calm. The leader of the clones pressed his palm on the ground, feeling the unique rhythm. On his arm, a small wave was transmitted along the viaduct and into the distance. Then, it merged with the vibrations created by the ape. Then, it was the second wave, the third wave. The rhythm changed as the beast tide approached, guiding the waves under their feet. The apes soon discovered that the ground under their feet began to tremble uncontrollably. In their confused eyes, huge cracks began to appear on the ground. Then, at an incomparably fast speed, the cracks spread to their front and back. In an instant, the ground under their feet shattered. In the gap between the huge concrete blocks, the apes screamed in pain. They were drawn into the friction between the stones. Flesh and blood splattered from the concrete millstone. However, the natural agility and balance of apes saved most of the ape. They relied on the steel bars in their hands. The little bit of strength that was controlled by the apes struggled to escape from the hell of the gravel. Most of the apes had far better control over their abilities than ordinary mutated humans. The natural instinct of beasts to kill allowed them to use their strength more freely. Apes did not have much brains, but most of the mutated humans did not use their brains much either. They used the motor abilities of their muscles and cerebellum to control their abilities. In this aspect, humans who lacked training were even worse than a group of beasts. They all used their muscles and nerves to react. Of course, the brainless mutated humans could not compare to the brainless ape. In their experiments, the researchers found that most apes were much faster at mastering their abilities than humans. With their agile bodies, they were better fighters than mutated humans. The apes, whose eyes were stimulated by the blood, roared and bared their sharp fangs. They climbed on the concrete ruins of the reinforced concrete and pounced on the army in front of them. The human technicians deployed their directional instruments from the back of the team, and the clones covered them. The cold-faced officer picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "Intelligence gathering complete. Requesting air support." In the distance, the Black Hawk mech. He quickly flew over the battlefield and dropped 2 cone-shaped hollow metal basket. The round silver metal ball was sprinkled evenly on the ground from the basket. With the silver metal ball as the center, the repulsive force of the electromagnetic field suddenly exploded. Uniform liquid. The fog shrouded the battlefield, and the magnetic fluid bound the fuel fog tightly above the ape army. Caesar stared at the white mist in fear. He screamed and ordered all the apes to leave the mist. But it was already too late. A spark blossomed in the center of the mist, and then a beautiful scarlet flower swayed, twisted, and bloomed on the battlefield. The flames devoured everything in the mist. The apes with supernatural abilities struggled helplessly. Except for a few with supernatural abilities who could escape from the flame, most of the apes could only struggle in the highly toxic fuel, letting the flame lick their bodies. Their hair was twisted little by little, giving off a burning smell. Then, they caught fire and burned. Their muscles quickly curled into a ball, giving off a charred color. Then, a curled-up, pitch-black corpse appeared not far away from the fire. It was only the result of being carbonized by the high temperature near the fire. The corpses that were really at the center of the fire had been mixed with the melted concrete, forming crimson magma that flowed on the glass-like soil. Ferrofluid cloud bomb. It was just one of the more backward weapons among the humans. This simple act of killing made all the apes who had seen it tremble in fear. Humans didn't care about food or hunger. They didn't care about survival or reproduction. Their purpose of killing was simple and terrifying. Animals killed for food and survival. They used their fangs to show off their strength, and used their muscles to determine their status. The rule of the game between them was that killing came first, and the strongest would win. But here, humans showed their unique cruelty. Just like children tearing apart the bodies of insects, humans also calmly killed other races in the natural world without any purpose. They used the unique arrogance of humans to tell this new civilization, "What does it have to do with you if we destroy you?" They weren't asking for opinions, nor were they pursuing benefits. Pure killing, pure destruction, and a clone army that simply obeyed orders formed this cold will. Cruelty and bloodshed were just its footnote. They used the arrogance of humans at the top of the food chain to dominate all life on this planet. They cut down, they hunted, they destroyed, and they killed. These things brought endless fear to other creatures on Earth, but to humans it was just a choice. Everything came from themselves and belonged to themselves. I destroyed everything. What did it have to do with you? There was no communication, no communication. Humans always made their own decisions. Whether to save or destroy, it was never related to these creatures themselves. It was because of the human ego. The ape civilization, which was in the embryonic stage of civilization, was fortunate to see the destruction machines of humans. They were killing, destroying, and even destroying themselves. These wild beasts that had only learned how to use tools, muscles, supernatural abilities, and instincts were so fragile that they couldn't withstand a single blow when faced with humans, the top civilization on Earth. In the face of electric currents, magnetic currents, steel, and gunpowder, Esper abilities were completely useless. In the face of artillery shells and bullets, muscles were no better than fat. In the short span of a few minutes, more than 6 million electromagnetic warheads, countless bombs, lasers, lightning balls, and incendiary bombs had been rained down on this small area. The torrent of steel and the torrent of muscles collided. Steel had never lost before. What was torn apart and crushed was always muscle, and it was always a fragile carbon-based organism. The mighty army of tens of thousands of apes was almost wiped out within a breath. They were torn into pieces by bullets and explosions, and scattered evenly on the ground of less than 1 square kilometer. They mixed with the reinforced concrete, and were evenly dyed with a layer of blood. Anyone who saw it couldn't help but shiver. The silver giant beast stood in the middle of the huge crater. Its eyes were red, and it was panting heavily. Its tyrannical eyes were staring at the army in the distance. From time to time, a metal piece the size of a head would hit its body at a speed of hundreds of kilometers per hour, making a sound that made people's teeth ache. When the giant beast was hit, its body would often shake, and a shallow dent would appear on its body. When the cannonballs hit the giant beast, its body felt as if it had been hit by a heavy hammer. Its 2 hind legs suffered the impact of the huge kinetic energy and dragged a long trail behind it. Its silver fur had long been messed up, and its strong chest was somewhat uneven and distorted. But the giant beast still endured and moved forward. It moved firmly towards the human army, 1 step at a time. Caesar trembled as he looked at it. In the rain of cannonballs and bullets, the beast went against the flow and faced those heavy blows directly. The sound of bones breaking, the dull sound of muscles cracking, and the clear sound of snapping appeared. With the concentrated attack of the cannonballs, a few huge dents appeared on the giant beast's body. The twisted muscles and bones made people want to cover their faces. The electromagnetic cannonballs could already smash the giant beast's bones. Just like that, the giant beast dragged 1 hind leg and roared at the sky. Even the humans seemed to be moved. The fierce cannonballs stopped for a moment, which was very unusual, allowing the giant beast to catch its breath. But soon, the shadow of the Black Eagle appeared in the sky again. This time, they had a more obvious target, the big guy standing in the middle of the battlefield. The cannonballs hit the giant beast's body heavily. This time, the bronze muscles and iron bones did not play any role. Black sticky liquid splashed out from the warhead. The giant beast's fur that was stained by the liquid gradually lost its beautiful metallic luster and became dull. Its agile and strong body also became extremely stiff. Under the gaze of the few apes, the giant beast was like a lifeless stone, gradually solidifying on the battlefield. Its dull granite-like body was hit head-on by a cannonball. Then, like a statue, it shattered into several pieces. Countless tiny robots jumped in mid-air, chasing and killing the apes who were lucky enough to escape. The magnetic manipulating mutant apes could barely control the landing point of the cannonball, protecting some of their kind in front of them. In the face of the robots made of composite materials, the swift speed and lethality made all the apes despair. Like shredding paper, they tore apart the alloy steel plate in front of them. The magnetic manipulating mutant ape's head was easily penetrated by the robot. This was not a war between 2 civilizations, but a massacre and extinction of the inferior party by the superior party. In less than 30 minutes, the flame of the ape civilization was on the verge of being extinguished. On Earth, the first exchange of civilizations began and ended with war. It lasted less than an hour. In human records, they only extinguished the escape of experimental animals once. For the ape civilization, it was destruction and rebirth. To be continued. Chapter 127. Coming out of the concentration camp, the professor was at a loss. At this moment there was an inexplicable, unclear, but real hole in his heart. In the face of this world that was changing too fast, the professor was caught unprepared. The so-called wall-breaker plan made him even more flustered and panicked. Sometimes, when people have too many choices, they will lose their direction. The professor was not a person who could not bear the responsibility. He had the courage and ability to bear the trust of the whole world. However, in the face of the game between the Earth civilization and the apocalypse, he, the person who knew the most, fell into a rare confusion. The purpose of the apocalypse was to control the development of human civilization. The purpose of the Earth civilization was to get rid of the control of the apocalypse. So what was his purpose? To protect humanity? To uphold justice? But in the game between the two sides, humanity was seeking its own death, and the apocalypse was not good. The professor wanted to maintain the existing order, let humanity live with dignity and happiness, but Chun-Ong said to him, "You have no choice in what I want to do." The apocalypse was like a person who gave him a choice. It gave him a question, and he made a choice. But did he really have a choice? The professor knew that as long as he still adhered to the ideals of the past, he had no choice in the question given by the apocalypse. There was only one choice, and that was no choice. But now Tianqi had given him an extremely complicated problem with infinite possibilities. The professor didn't want to give up on this opportunity. He wanted to temporarily jump out of the chessboard between Tianqi and Earth civilization and re-examine this game from the perspective of a chess player. He wanted to reshape his ideals. This ideal was no longer what humanity should maintain, but what humanity should become. A blueprint for the future. The professor knew that the apocalypse chose Magneto, and at the same time, it chose him. The first help he gave. It was the prophet Wolverine from the future that he had created. Only with Wolverine could he get more information about civilization, get rid of the current narrow vision, and look at the world with a future vision. Look at his choice. He even went to complete the wall-breaker plan. Wolverine was not imprisoned in a concentration camp, or rather, the U.S. government did not give up on the combat police, who were still valuable pawns. They left the Xavier Academy and lived in a military base with the clone warriors. On the one hand, there were quite a number of people in the U.S. government who were hostile to them and treated them and clones as weapons. Putting them together was an insult in itself. On the other hand, the clone army, which was under the absolute control of the government, was also a form of surveillance. However, contrary to what they imagined, most of the combative police liked to stay with these simple-minded clones. Wolverine liked these pure warriors, and the other mutants who were ostracized and suspected by humans also had a good impression of these simple-minded clones. In fact, they are like children, untouched by the world, dyed with color. They were far away from scheming and being used, and there were no longer any suspicious or disgusted gazes. Here, they received a long-awaited sense of relaxation and recognition. Perhaps the combative police felt uncomfortable staying among humans. When the professor came in, the activity room was very lively. Logan was bare-chested and was arm wrestling with a tall and muscular clone warrior. The clone's lifespan was not long. In theory, it could only be used for 10 years. After modulation, they would definitely not live for more than 20 years. However, their smiles were simple and happy. They were happy to make friends with the combative police. The professor could see that in the eyes of the combative police and the clones, there was a common desire. They were eager to be recognized. Because of this, they got along very well. Logan's muscles were knotted, and his muscle fibers were like steel wires. They were stretched taut, and as they expanded and contracted, a powerful force erupted. His eyes were full of aggression, like a Siberian tiger. Between the two of them, there was a different kind of vitality in the confrontation of power and collision. "Professor, you finally came to me." After the victory, Logan wiped his sweaty body. I knew that after you went to see Magneto, you would definitely come back to me. What do you want to ask? Speak. When humans fought against Skynet, did anything happen? There was, shocking results? They must not be helpless against Skynet. What efforts did you make? The professor organized his words. I want to understand it and decide my attitude towards them. Don't hesitate, Professor. Logan interrupted him and said, We believe in you. You will make the right choice. I trust you, just like I trust myself. I feel your confusion, but I have to say this. Your responsibility is not a burden. We are your comrades, not your responsibility. We believe in you, and please believe in us. Believe in us. We will always believe in you, even at the end of the world. Thank you, Logan. The professor sighed and covered his face tiredly. Thank you. You are right. Humans did not give up against Skynet. Even if the Sentinel robots failed, we launched many self-saving plans. The most successful and large-scale ones were the Moses Project, initiated by the Prophet, and the Genesis Project, initiated by the Angel, Logan said slowly. Of course, there is also your Reverse the Future project, Professor. Every path of failure had its own reasons, but the path of success was always the same. The professor understood this. Even if the world had changed so much and technology had developed so quickly, there were only a few paths that could successfully fight against the apocalypse. No matter how bizarre the wall-facing project was, it had to respect the basic laws of human society. The wall-facing project was definitely among the plans that Logan knew. Tell me about the Angel Project, the professor said in deep thought. In the future, we discovered two special types of mutants, the angel type and the devil type. The former was like an angel, while the latter was like a demon woman and blue devil. Of course, there were others at that time, but their basic characteristics were already very clear. They were like the angels and devils in the myths, with extremely special characteristics. The Genesis Project gathered these characteristics and created real angels and devils, extraordinary creatures, holy spirits and evil spirit. They placed their hopes on the myths, hoping to use them to fight against Skynet. Fight against Skynet. The professor felt a deep sense of helplessness. Everything Wolverine knew, the apocalypse knew, and even more. Everything he knew about the future was also a projection of the apocalypse in his mind. The wall-facing project might be able to hide from Skynet, but what about the apocalypse, which could observe the quantum state of the future? The professor did not have high hopes for this. Yes, fight against Skynet. In order to fight against Skynet's infiltration of our intelligence, we formulated the Dictator Project. The leaders of each human base would exercise dictatorship without any explanation to the people they ruled. It seems that the plan has already begun. Wolverine's words made the professor fall into silence. But does the apocalypse know? Does Skynet know too? The professor was puzzled. Yes, we know that Skynet knows, but we have no other choice. We can only use this method to put into practice any possible, even if it's a crazy idea. The most important thing for the Dictator Project is not to keep it secret from Skynet, but from us, from humanity itself. In order to prevent the ignorant and relatively stupid public from interfering with the ideas of the geniuses, we formulated a plan to give all the power to the geniuses. Let them realize their most absurd ideas, even if they only have a 1 in a billion chance of success. This is the wall-facing project. The professor looked up. They are not deceiving Skynet, they are deceiving us. Using collective strength to realize individual forward-looking plans, to surpass the continuous development of technology, to throw away the burden of the technology tree, to achieve leaps and bounds in technological development. What they need is an absolutely crazy plan that subverts our common sense. Just like the wise men among the primitive people, who exhausted half of their people to build electric motors. The professor said excitedly, "This is the wall-facing project." Wolverine looked at the professor, who had forgotten his usual calmness and wisdom and had fallen into madness. The professor collapsed in his wheelchair in sorrow and murmured, "They are questioning the stupidity of the people. They are choosing the best individuals to decide the fate of the entire world. Only the saints can save the world." Wolverine slowly recited the maxim of the Church of the Apocalypse when Skynet's apocalypse came. The Wall Breakers project is to eliminate those who have no potential and aren't crazy enough. It is to select the wise ones who will decide the fate of mankind. The Wall Breakers and the Wall Facers are the first collaboration between mankind and Skynet. It is a civilization advancement experiment under the control of Tianqi. It is a technological advancement experiment that will lead to technological advancement. The professor burst into tears. Using the sacrifice of the group to achieve the greatness of the individual. Using all the power of human civilization to realize an absolute and one will, to cut off the shackles of society and groups on wisdom, and to release the greatest creativity of mankind. This is the goal of the apocalypse. He is giving the best, the most imaginative and talented people the power to realize their great wisdom. It is easy to fight against a civilization, but it is not easy to fight against the wisest people in a civilization. The professor heard this sentence from Chen. He was not in front of the professor now, but the professor knew that he knew the situation here like the back of his hand. As soon as he brought Wolverine back from the future, the wall-breaking project's plan had already begun. One person is great, but a group of people is stupid. They have the richest imagination, but the world shackles their wisdom and gives them the power to realize their wisdom. This is the true meaning of the wall-facing project. They are not the ones facing the wall, but the whole world. Let the world lose the power to restrain wisdom, and let the stupid majority face the wall. A crazy plan. The professor sighed. The apocalypse, you are really crazy. Chapter 128. When the professor wanted to see the prophet, he finally understood the terrible power of Skynet. He finally understood that the world's fear of Skynet was not without reason. The prophet still looked like a little girl, but her face had long lost its childishness. Instead, it was something that the professor could not understand, a kind of awareness and wisdom. She smiled and let the professor sit on her small stool. The entire base was blocked by Skynet. The most secure base of the U.S. government, in the eyes of Skynet, was not much different from their own backyard. Wall Breaker Professor, you are finally here. The prophet was not surprised. Yes, for Moses, I am here. The professor's face was filled with deep pain. Sometimes the truth could hurt a person. If he lived in the world of fantasy, then when he faced the reality, he would inevitably feel pain. Now the professor was facing this pain. Stop, Moses. This plan is too terrible. It will not only destroy you, but it will also destroy the world. You can't destroy the apocalypse, and then create another apocalypse. These things should not be borne by you. The professor looked at the prophet, who was still a child, and only wanted to persuade her one last time. Professor, don't treat me like a child. The prophet's face was sophisticated and mature beyond her age, which made the professor feel sad. I used to be regarded as a monster, because I can know their fate that has not yet happened. They called me a witch, called me a monster. I don't feel sad because this is my choice. Like today, the choice I make must come from my heart, because no one knows the consequences of choice better than me. When you see your fate, when you can see your future, you will completely touch yourself. When you can know your future, you will be in touch with yourself. No one can deceive me, and no one can control me. The one who pushed me to make this choice is me. This is the fate of the prophet. They must be wise, because they have made more mistakes than anyone else, but they have countless opportunities to be forgiven. The prophet is the messenger of God, and the creation of the prophet is the goal of Moses. The professor looked at the prophet's calm eyes, looked at her smart, intelligent eyes. So you choose death? Humans could not become prophets, only spirits could. You think it's a sacrifice, but humans don't need it. If they want to sacrifice a child, they'll have to do it over my dead body. All justice will not be hidden under filth. Child, you do not have the right to sacrifice yourself. If they want me to choose between the survival of the human race and the sacrifice of my children, I will have to choose between them. I will never ignore the latter. The professor's tone was sorrowful as he looked into the prophet's eyes. With the firmness of his life, he said these words. The prophet's eyes were a little red. She sobbed, "Thank you, Professor. But I must do it." This was not forced by anyone, nor was it a sacrifice. Instead, it's a chance for me to see myself clearly. I'm just a child who has fumbled in the dark for too long. In order to see the world clearly, I've let go of some unimportant things. The professor started to say something, but the prophet interrupted him. The United States government believes that only a higher dimensional being can defeat the apocalypse. That's why they gave me the identity of a wall-faced person. Because I'm the only human with such potential. I knew about this plan 6 months before they made the decision. That's why I appeared in front of you, Professor. Because I also want to complete this plan. After becoming a wall-faced person, I had more resources to tap into the potential of my ability. In the Heisenberg uncertainty experiment, I also knew the speed and position of the electron. There's only one possibility, and that is to become a quantum entangled observer in a higher latitude. Time is visible and observable in a higher latitude. I have the potential to become a higher latitude creature. The professor pinched his right hand tightly and said slowly, "So you formulated the Moses plan. By strengthening your quantum entanglement cycle in this world and interfering with other time latitudes, you, who exist in other time latitudes, will eventually realize the latitudes of your existence expanding from this world to the timeline. We are points in time, and you will become a bug in the timeline, extending your existence forward and backward. I'm not dead, but omnipresent." The prophet laughed. Only in this way, with the help of the omnipresent prophet, can humans fight against the apocalypse, and even expel it from this world. You found traces of quantum ghosts in the ball lightning in the ionosphere, confirming that quantum in different timelines can superimpose coherence. Therefore, the premise of this plan is that your quantum entangled state must be strong enough to spread in time. After people die, quantum effects can be observed. It's precisely because of this that we can be sure that humans can't become prophets. Only spirits can. The prophet said calmly, as if she was not talking about a topic about death, but about today's weather. Therefore, you used the ball lightning to turn yourself into a macroscopic quantum state. Then, in the state of a quantum ghost, you used your Esper ability to spread on the timeline so that you in other worlds would also become a quantum state. They would become a part of your existence and jump to a higher dimension. I will become Moses. Help humans fight against the apocalypse. The prophet nodded. Congratulations, Professor. You've broken through the wall. The professor trembled and stood up from the wheelchair. He said directly, "What really makes me happy is not to help Skynet destroy the plan of humans, but to stop your crazy plan." His psionic ability directly controlled the prophet in front of him. "I will stop you. But you're too late." A voice that the professor could not imagine appeared behind him. The professor could not support his body and sat back in the wheelchair. His body was stiff, and he looked straight at the person walking toward him. Chernong nodded at the prophet and said softly, "Professor, you're too late." Behind him, the gate of the base slowly opened, and countless prophets floated in the nutrient solution. Clones. The professor struggled. The prophet in front of you is just a clone. The real prophet is talking to you through her. Then where is she now? The professor hurriedly asked. The prophet has turned into a butterfly and flew away. She's everywhere. Facing the countless clones, Chernong turned back and said, The macro-quantum furnace at the center is the place to achieve quantum immortality. 7 days later, the prophet will become a ghost quantum entangled body here. Then it's not too late. It's too late. The prophet and Chen Ong said at the same time. The professor looked at the two of them in confusion. Chen Ong said slowly, "The one who is talking to you now is the prophet 7 days later. The expansion of the hyperdimension has been completed. From the perspective of the dot time, all of this happened in the future, but the current timeline is established, so the prophet is the prophet 7 days later. The prophet now has disappeared. And the apocalypse in front of you is also the apocalypse 3 days ago." The prophet said slowly, "Our war on the multidimensional timeline has already begun. Interference and anti-interference in the quantum state, variables and predetermined variables. I am interfering with the world interference ability of the apocalypse on all timelines, and he is covering my quantum disturbance variables." Chapter 129. The North American Rocky Mountains were one of the most vast mountain ranges on Earth. The terrain here was rugged and sparsely populated. It was an excellent location to build a secret military base. Some places with hazy weather all year round were also good places to prevent satellite detection. Although there were all kinds of electronic equipment, the sentry post was still set up at least 10 kilometers away. Even if there was no one passing through this place all year round, the government didn't let the cloned soldiers replace the mobile sentry post here. Those who guarded these places were the most determined and outstanding soldiers. Even among the entire military base in the United States, the importance of this base could be ranked at least in the top 3. It was not because of the important secrets kept here, but because it was destined to face the invasion of a terrifying enemy. The Global Mutant Gene Bank. It had more than 50 million genetic information storage of mutants and mutant gene carriers. This was the unlocking data of the genetic code and the complete puzzle of the mutant gene. For scientific research, it was incomparably important. However, for more secret military bases, the value of this place was actually very little. The mutant gene was not a very single piece of data. Other than the more complete genetic information stored here, there was nothing more valuable. The secrets here were not irreplaceable, so it would not become a target for theft. Most scientific research did not require too many mutant gene samples. The complete information stored here was only to make it more convenient for the researchers in the United States to study the mutant gene. If there was any unique value here, it would be more convenient and more comprehensive. Who would attack one of the most dangerous bases in the United States for a moment of convenience? There was only one possibility, which was the only reason why this place was heavily guarded. To guard against the apocalypse. Of course, there was the function of a sentry. It was not to send people to their deaths when the apocalypse came. It was to serve as a reminder and warning, and at the same time to drive away tourists and herdsmen who tried to approach here. When Chen Ong approached the base from the small path, the sentry's breathing became urgent. He desperately hit the alarm button on his body. At the same time, he made his heart beat violently, trying to get the life detection system on his arm to send out a warning signal. However, no matter how he struggled, the signal light still emitted a calm green light. Whether it was the soul chain, quantum communication, or even the life disturbance system and mental scan, the sentry post always received normal information. Normal information. Even when Chen Ong left in front of him, these monitoring devices, which would sound alarms when a fly flew past, did not react at all. Skynet's technological controls. The sentry secretly cursed as he recalled the content of his training. He hurriedly retreated from the bunker and dug out a pile of specially made fuel barrels not far away. Go up and kick it away. The originally dense, colorful smoke disappeared without a trace. The chimney lay quietly on the ground with the mouth wide open. The chemical fuel inside was neatly arranged. The sentry kicked open a chimney, but there was still no reaction. Then the second one, the third one. When all the chimneys fell to the side, he had to admit that the inferior technology of these chimneys had also failed. There was also some cow dung and wet firewood on the side. The hidden sentry took out a lighter. He was ready to try these ancient alarm method. However, the fiercely rubbing flint did not produce any sparks. Even the heat generated by friction was interfered with by Skynet. The hidden sentry was a little desperate. He did not know why Skynet's robots did not deal with him after he was exposed. Either Apocalypse did not care, or Skynet did not need it. Both possibilities were provoking his self-esteem. The most terrible thing in the world was not to lose in the hands of the enemy, but to be ignored by the enemy. The former was a warrior in the eyes of the enemy, while the latter was nothing. The hidden sentry could not care so much anymore. He shouted in the direction of the base and screamed at the top of his lungs. However, he was desperate to find that after the sound wave left his mouth, the air became turbid as if it had become colloidal. Then, the sound was absorbed and disappeared without a trace. With the desperate mentality of dying together, the soldier opened fire. More hidden sentry opened fire, but Chen-Ong still walked in front of them. The laser emitter, the deuterium lamp, did not light up, and even the electrical resistance of the metal had changed. The electromagnetic field of the Gaussian weapons could not be converted at all. These weapons were completely useless because of a little bit of hindrance. The more microscopic Skynet, from the chemical and molecular level, prevented the reaction of the weapons in their hand. The microscopic lock, in an absurd form, manifested. Only now did humans deeply realize that the level of control of a weapon determined whether it was powerful or not. Skynet's control ability went deep into the atomic nucleus, showing crushing results against human weapons that were still struggling at the nano level. Your Excellency Apocalypse, don't tease our security personnel, please come in. The gate of the base suddenly opened, and a gnome doctor staggered out from inside. Please forgive me, my body is not very convenient, so I could not welcome you outside. Although your body is short in terms of thinking, you are a giant. Chen-Ong smiled. I have heard many people's praises, but none of them made me happier than your acknowledgement. Bolivar limped to Chen-Ong and reached out to hold Chen-Ang's right hand. Really, your achievements in physics make me gasp in admiration. Skynet is really a genius idea, especially the energy physics, space physics, and dimension physics that you develop. This century is your era. I have read your masterpieces and learned a lot. Could you please autograph my book? This book, Expansion of Dimensions, is my favorite. Chen-Ong smiled. When they published it, they did not give me any royalties. Strictly speaking, this is a pirated book. That's too bad. Can you sign on my back? Just like what you said before, you are a dwarf in body, but you are a giant in mind. Bolivar rubbed his hands like an admirer, looking at Chen-Ong expectantly. Chen-Ong picked up a pen and wrote this sentence on the back of his suit. A row of strange machines with slender bodies appeared in front of them. These machines had extremely smooth surfaces. Even under the microscopic level, they still looked smooth. Molecules and basic materials could not be seen. The rough surface of the metal had extremely good physical properties. Bolivar stepped forward and introduced, Sentinel Robot Type 3. This is based on your new material science, Dr. Apocalypse. Because of the advancement in material science, it produced a new model. Their design is old, and other than the advancement in material science, there is nothing commendable about it. Weakening the strong and weak nuclear force between the nucleus and the electron, shrinking the size of the atom by thousands of times, and using the atomic magnetic field to maintain this state, the advancement in microscopic material science has indeed brought great scientific development. Between the atoms, between the nucleus and the electron, those gaps that are thousands of times larger than the size of the particles are the main hindrance to the advancement in material properties. Chen-Ong analyzed bit by bit as the sentinel robot in front of him said. The advancement brought about by the advancement of this material is extremely obvious. How much has the Sentinel's performance improved? Using old materials to create the Sentinel Type 2 is almost unable to pose a threat to the improved version. It is even hard for it to leave a mark on the Sentinel Type 3's material. The difference in combat power is an exponential increase. Bolivar sincerely asked, "Does this robot have any weaknesses?" "Just activate it and you will know." While speaking, Chun-Ong had already activated the Sentinel. Its sensitive electronic eyes swept across. Immediately, the warning light turned red where Chun-Ong was, and the mechanical voice said, "Highest level of alert detected, initiating clearance mission." First of all, the ability to observe and obtain information is full of loopholes. Chun-Ong took a step forward and disappeared from the detection of the electronic eyes. Only his voice remained in place. The depth of information obtained is not as good as an ordinary person, and the range is also insufficient. I can even induce and control its information acquisition system to make it do anything. Highest level of alert detected, initiating clearance mission. The red electronic eyes were aimed at Dr. Bolivar, as if directly ignoring Dr. Bolivar's highest level of authority and wanting to destroy him. Chun-Ong stopped this behavior, and the eyes of the Sentinel robot returned to the green standby state. Second point, the immaturity of the material. High-density material does indeed have many advantages. For example, it is almost indestructible by low-density materials, and it can withstand the basic work of a star. It can be said to be a leapfrog development that is better than low-density materials, but it is a type of high-energy material. According to the law of energy, it can only exist in high-energy environments. This is its fatal weakness. Once the restraint of the magnetic field is broken, the collision of the strong and weak nuclear force and the rapid disintegration of the high-density material, not only can it destroy it, but it can also destroy a sphere with a diameter of 4 kilometers with it as the center. The destructive power is comparable to a small nuclear weapon. In fact, in the process of material disintegration, it will indeed undergo a partial nuclear reaction. Chun-Ong lightly tapped the Sentinel robot's body with his finger. A scorching hot vibration gradually spread out from its body. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that an intense energy reaction was taking shape. This energy was like a small nuclear bomb. However, this kind of nuclear reaction was not unstoppable. Chun-Ong casually snapped his fingers, and Skynet quickly began to replicate and infect the Sentinel robot. A robot that was less than the size of an adult expanded and collapsed into a huge metal body that exceeded hundreds of tons. Under the control of Skynet, it disintegrated into atoms and disappeared into the air. Bolivar had a hallucination that the air around him seemed heavier, even though he knew that was impossible. To be continued.